none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest. You shouldn't have any, but if you do, you think you do, put your hand up now, please. Thank you. Seeing none. Motion to convene in committee of the whole. Councillor McAlpine, Councillor Bell, or Councillor Pierce. All those in favor? We stand as a committee. Michael.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the start of our 2020 budget process. I've just got a bit of an opening speech here, and then I'll be turning it over to a bunch of staff to walk us through the rest of the day. I think we've got a good day ahead of us, and I think staff have done a lot of work on what I think is a good budget presentation. Earlier this year, we proposed a fairly aggressive budget schedule, which was a reflection that over the past 11 months, you've gone through a fairly big budget process as well as a fairly large orientation program. So we think you've probably learned everything there is that you need to know at this point about the county. We don't need to reiterate those things given the timeline. So this is a fairly aggressive budget process. But as we've always said, we've laid out a schedule. It's a 2-day schedule, but if we need additional time, that's council's prerogative to take whatever time it needs to make the decision it feels appropriate. The process also reflects feedback we heard from council about the interest in having full-day budget sessions and a more expedited process. The 2020 budget, in my opinion, is fairly straightforward, and it really doesn't reflect the amount of work that I think goes into this by staff. Not only the finance staff, but all the departments do put a lot of work into this to make sure that we're delivering an applicable budget to council for its consideration. The base budget, which is the kind of the status quo budget that we've presented through most of this document, would see an addition to the tax levy of $1.8 million, which would represent a net increase on an average tax bill of about 2.1%. This figure does include some costs, which I would say fall outside of what we would normally classify as inflationary, driven by inflation. Some of these things are the full freight of the Brant E-Ride program, increased insurance and WSIB premiums, which are really market-driven, the cost of annualizing new positions that we added in last year's budget, which was an upstaffing budget. The CPI is trending around 2% right now, the 12-month trailing CPI, so we believe that the base budget is a fairly realistic document. As directed, we've brought forward a capital budget as well, and we're going to introduce the capital budget at the beginning of the next meeting, I believe. We think we can get through what's proposed today. If we have time, we could touch on the capital budget today as well. Asset management continues to be a preeminent topic in all municipal sectors and in the public sector more broadly. And with tendering prices coming in at significantly outside of inflation, we've inflated the capital budget this year based on the construction price index, which we think is prudent. The capital budget, as always, contains a number of projects, fixed assets, and non-fixed assets for rehabilitation, renewal, and replacement. And then finally, as directed, we've presented a range of new spending initiatives that are presented as decision packages. And these include a range of project strategies and assets that we've identified as either critical gaps in current services, opportunities for best management to optimize existing services, or new services that would enhance the way we serve the community. Included in this are 5.5 full-time positions, noting that most of these are actually part-time or contract roles that we're trying to evolve into full-time roles to create a more stable organization and to position us better to recruit talent, which is in very high demand right now. Also included in these packages are a range of services enhancements, such as an enhanced OPP detachment service enhancements, new software systems to ensure that the organization functions effectively, and a bunch of strategies that are identified in our strategic plan, as well as some other things. Our day will begin with Robin, who will do a budget overview, and she'll add to some of the concepts that I've just outlined in brief. Each department will then present their operating budget, and then if we have the time, we'll get to the capital budget with Robin presenting an overview to that. But we suspect that we'll be into our second day for that. The budget binder was circulated last week. I'm sure everyone's had a chance to go through it. We've tried to keep the document as streamlined as possible, still providing good information to council for their decision making. I think it's a fairly easy read, and as we have for the past several years, it is a high-level budget. It's not a line-by-line budget. And we've focused on key drivers on what's generating increases at all departmental levels. The binder is logically subdivided into both departments and classes of budget presentation. And as always, as we bring new information forward, the staff at the back will update your binders accordingly. So I wanted to note that staff have been working on the 10-year financial plan. We talked about this a bit last night, but it does focus mostly on capital financing for new infrastructure, but it also does a very thorough benchmarking of the county's financial position, and it makes some projections on operating expenses and future tax assessment. So we had hoped at one point, as I think was mentioned last night, to bring that in as part of the budget. We looked at it last week in its first draft. It needs some more work. I think it's a very good document, and I think when we're done it's going to be a really good guideline for council over the next 10 years on how it's going to make the investments that the community needs. So we're going to just play it by ear. We're going to continue to work on this. It's been a challenge for the finance staff this year to take that on, as well as finalizing the budget, but also this was a development charge background study year, so it's a pretty tricky year for them. I think they've got some more capacity now with this behind them, so they're going to be able to put some heavy lifting into that, and we hope to have that document to you in the next 3 to 4 weeks. But we may have it done by the next budget meeting. We're not sure. Again, we want to have the right document, not a hastily prepared document. So with that, those are my opening comments, Your Worship, and with that, I will suggest that perhaps Ms. Hewitt can commence with her budget overviews. Thank you. Your Worship, maybe if I just could, I believe Robin, your presentation is the one that was handed out this morning? This one?
I believe it was in the budget binder.
Okay.
But did you guys hand it out, a new version today, or was it? Okay, I think it was in the budget binder as well. Yeah, okay. All right, I just want to see.
You've got two in case you want, to have one for posterity.
This is the one we went to the sun.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2020 budget first session. My presentation is not as involved as it was last year. Last year, we did the whole Municipal Finance 101. So this is a much pared down version from that, and we might as well get started. So through my overview, first we'll look at the budget process. We'll look at the 2020 proposed budget, the key drivers, the economic outlook, and then we'll look at some of the guiding documents and then what the strategic initiatives are for 2020. So the budget process, it's a little bit different than prior years because we've shortened it, but today, as you can see, we're doing the information and context piece. On the 27th, we'll do the decision-making, and the capital will fall either at the end of today or at the beginning of November 27th. And then the final approval will be done at Council on December 17th. So the starting point for the operating budget. So staff were directed to manage and prepare a draft operating budget which maintains the current levels of service and include decision packages that would increase levels of service. The starting point for the capital budget, the staff were directed to prepare a draft capital budget to fund maintenance and or replacement of existing assets and infrastructure with a capital levy of $9.8 million, and to include decision packages for the purchase or construction of any new assets. However, staff noted that there was $1.357 million, there was $1.357 million that was in the operating budget that was related to asset maintenance that should have actually been in the capital budget. So we moved that 1.357 out of operating and into capital, and we applied the construction index of 5.2% to that, as we did to the base capital budget, which brings our new base capital budget to $11.256 million. So that's our starting point for the asset management piece. You probably have all seen this chart before. It's just the basics of how taxes are calculated. So expenses minus non-tax revenues equals the tax levy. The tax levy divided by total assessment equals the tax rate. And the tax rate times the assessed value of the property equals the tax bill. So this is, at a high level, a synopsis of the 2020 budget. You can see that the 2020 revenues are $47.6 million, which is an increase of $1.5 million. And expenses are $103.2 million, which is an increase of $3.4 million. That brings our total increase to $1.87 million, which is a 3.5% increase. We'll get into the details of what's driving these numbers further on in the presentation. So the key drivers. So what's driving that $1.879 million? The first thing is the net impact of annualization of positions approved in 2019. So if you remember, I believe there was 21 positions approved in 2019. However, they were approved from July onwards. So we had to make up that gap as a starting point for 2020. There was grid step increases, cost of living staff increases, WSIB premium increases, insurance premiums, which were offset somewhat by a contribution from the insurance reserve, the Brant E-Ride program, debenture servicing costs, and a decrease in boundary compensation. And again, when we go through this, we'll get into the details a little bit more of those. So that 1.87 million increase equates to a 2.09% increase on an average home assessed at $350,000. That's an increase of $58.20 from the 2019.
Yeah, I'm not sure, are we going to ask questions as we go here, or wait till the end, or how are we going to?
How do you want to do it, Robin?
Why don't we ask them as we go?
Councillor Pierce.
Yeah, if I could, I'm just wondering where that 350,000 comes from, because there's not many houses that I can think of that are only $350,000. I'm curious where that number,
Well, when we look at the BMA study, which provides an average household value, and then we use basically a round number. The actual average was in the range of $331,000, according to BMA, but that is also a year behind. So we've inflated it to the $350,000.
wow, that's interesting, because I don't know too many houses around that are only 350,000, but, okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll go through some of these key drivers. Number one is the boundary adjustment revenue. So on the left, you can see what the county will receive each year for other boundary revenue. So you can see the 2020 amount is the same as every other year at $1.163 million, which will come to an end after 2027. And the chart on the right is the amount that the county receives for recovery of lost taxes. So that is a declining balance. So every year that's going down by $170,593. So that amount is reflected in a reduction of revenue in this year's budget. So compensation, we touched on this already a little bit, but again, the annualization of new positions, there are grid step increases, WSIB premium increases, and the COLA increase, which is set at 1.75%, which we have done historically for the last number of years. Just to put that in context, these are some comparable municipalities and the COLA increase percent that they applied to those. The average, when you look at them all, is at 1.91%. So expense driver insurance.
Excuse me, Robin. Councillor
Yes,
Bell?
sorry.
Sorry to interrupt, but if I sum those up, Robin, it comes to 760,000. In the summary page for the proposed budget, the salaries, wages and benefits went up by 1.4 million. Is there something I'm missing there? Is there a fact that I'm not adding to it?
I don't have the chart in front of me, just let me go back to that. What you see on the line, I believe you're talking about in the expense line, is the gross number. Some of those wage increases are offset by funding, so there's a net impact that wouldn't be as high as that number that's the 1.4.
Thank you.
So this is on the compensation slide here, this is the net effect after funding of some of those positions. So insurance, so the county went to RFP in 2019 for an insurance provider. The existing provider at the time, which was Cowan, was the unsuccessful bidder. BFL won the contract and the county saved almost $400,000. That $400,000 was put into an insurance reserve to offset future fluctuations in insurance rates. So when the rates were provided by BFL for 2020, there was a significant increase to the rate. It was came in quoted at $417,000 higher than the previous year. So at the same time, we talked to Cowan, and they already had an intimate knowledge of our insurance program, and they were able to provide us a better rate. Insurance rates across the board, the insurance market has really hardened, and most rates are going up across the board in all sectors. So even with a better quote, the rate was going up by $363,000 with Cowan's. So we used $150,000 out of that insurance stabilization reserve to offset that impact. We didn't use the whole amount because we don't know what's going to happen next year. The rates could go up again, and we need to protect ourselves somewhat. Debt charges, sorry.
Excuse me, Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The insurance increase, is that caused generally because insurance rates are going up all across the province? Or is it because we've had some significant claims that we're having our rates increased?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in general, the market has hardened. So that means rates across the board have gone up. And it's not unusual to see when you have a new provider, they come in with a good rate, and then the next year they go up. So that's not unexpected. And in addition to the overall market conditions, it's not an unexpected thing to see.
And do you think that's driven by some of the climate claims that may have come up that are causing flooding and
I really can't comment on that. I'm not an expert in insurance. I don't know what's driving. But typically, when the market hardens, I believe it's because of an increased number of claims for whatever events.
But we had been working with Cowan's and working on our risk management, and I expect we're doing better as far as risk management and managing claims. I don't think I see as many of those orange sheets anymore coming through that we used to, so
Yeah.
that's good news.
Maybe when Jody does her presentation, she could comment on that. She would have better knowledge about the impacts of the good things that we're doing to mitigate risk.
Thank you.
So debt charges. So in 2019, we issued $9.5 million in debt. So that debt has to be serviced, interest and principal, in the 2020 budget. So that has had an impact, a net impact of $124,985 on the levy. The actual interest and principal is $606,781. However, much of that is offset by contributions from reserves to pay for that debt.
Councillor Bell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Robin, if I remember from last year's presentation, you told us there was a ceiling that we should stay within for debt. Could you remind me of that and tell me where we are relative to it?
Okay, that is the annual repayment limit. I believe I have further information in my presentation about that. If not, it's in the financial plan. I'm getting the two mixed up right now. But it's legislated that our principal and interest payments are a maximum of 25% of our own source revenues. Our own debt management plan limits that to 15%. The 15% is self-imposed. That is in the capital presentation, off the top of my head. We are under that number, and it depends whether you look at what the debt that's been issued versus the debt that's been approved. Yeah, that number will be coming in the capital presentation. There is some debt capacity. However, when we do get to the long-term financial plan, then we have a lot of projects in the next 10 years that we want to do. Potentially.
Your worship, if I could, and debt is a huge topic of the financial plan. I think that council's in for a very fulsome discussion on debt and what council's wish is in terms of utilizing, fully leveraging itself or maintaining a lower position through a focus on maybe prudence. And this will be well discussed with the financial plan.
Okay.
Because most of our debt projections are for new capital, so.
Yeah, glad to hear that. Thank you.
And if I could just take this time to remind council to please go through the chair so that we don't get any awkward conversations going one-to-one. So just remember that I'm here. Thank you. Robin, you want to continue?
So another expense driver is a new initiative, the Brant E-Ride program. As you're all well aware of what the E-Ride program is, and we had a discussion about this last night. It launched in October 2019. It's partially funded from the provincial gas tax, but there is a net levy impact of $131,729. And that's in the contracted services budget line it doesn't necessarily stand, though I think we did break it out on the main overview. So the economic outlook. This one's a bit trickier to forecast. So the U.S. economy is expected to moderate, and there is uncertainty and diminished confidence that will affect business investment. There's a bit of a risky environment with the U.S.-China trade talks, Brexit, and the U.S. politics, which could damage the world economy, and it could possibly drag Canada into a recession. There's a lot of ifs and unknowns in that at this point. Given that, the real GDP is forecast to grow by 1.4%, and it was forecast to grow 1.4% in 2019, but 2019 is not over yet, so we don't have that final number. 1.5% in 2020, and 1.5% in 2021, and 1.9% in 2022. The household income and debt, there was robust job and wage growth, which has led to a strong household disposable income growth, which has helped to slightly ease the burden of household debt. The proportion of household debt to disposable income has declined from a recent high of 189.1% in 2017. So that is a good news story. So the Canadian dollar, we just have a little bit of history here on the Canadian dollar. It's expected to average 75 cents US or 131 Canadian to the end of 2020. And the Canadian dollar currency exchange rate forecast, this came from a source on the forecastcharts.com, and they anticipate within a range of 0.07 that the rate will remain at 1.31. Which is down from the current rate of 1.36. Inflation is expected to reach 2% in 2019. You can see the history of inflation since 2016, and it's leveling out a little bit. 2019 at 2%, 2020 at 2%, 2021 at 1.9%, and 2022 at 1.9%. And though the Bank of Canada has held its policy rate unchanged at 1.75% since October 2018, the bank is expected to follow the lead of the U.S. Federal Reserve and to cut rates over the next year, which would foster more investment in the real estate market. Long-term interest rates are expected to rise from 1.5% in 2019 to 2.5% in 2022. The local employment rates. So the jobless rate is at 3.2% for Brantford and Brant area. That's a record low, and it's the lowest in the country. The same time last year, it was at 6.2%. The national rate is 5.5%. So you can see how this would create recruitment challenges and a very competitive job market. So BMA. So we reviewed the BMA Consulting Annual Study, and some of the key points to take out of the BMA study are about county residents. They have a higher than average income. They have a higher than average assessment on their homes. They pay lower taxes than average, and they have a lower cost of government than average. And they also have lower property taxes as a percentage of their household income than average. So the story that that's telling is that there is capacity within the community to support the increased level of service that is being demanded. So speaking of levels of service, there are numerous guiding documents that support the level of service that council provides to the community. And using that as a base, we use that as a base, to formulate the long-term financial plan. So when we do get to that, you'll see we've included every ask that's out there in the community right now to see how we can do that, or if we can do that, or provide you the information to make decisions on doing that. Some levels of service are legislated, maybe best practices or requirements of council. So there are a number of guiding documents that are approved by council that outline many of the county's levels of service. So there's a number, we can go through them all, I'm sure you can read them all. There's countywide documents such as the strategic plan, the municipal act, the purchasing bylaw and policy, asset management plan, fees and charges bylaw, and human resources policies and procedures. And then we can go into each department with development services. There's development services review, the planning act, the official plan, Ontario Building Code Act, and the building bylaw. Development engineering review looks at the development and engineering standards, the official plan, transportation master plan, Paris master servicing plan, the Ontario provincial standards, OPS and OPSD, and various area studies. Roads and infrastructure uses a roads need study, the transportation master plan, minimum maintenance standards, OSIM for bridges, the Brant Safe Streets strategy, the asset management legislation, and the Paris master servicing plan. So solid waste, there's various regulations, Ontario Regulation 347, the environment compliance approvals, Environment Protection Act, solid waste collection contract, solid waste facility design, operation and management plan, and solid waste control bylaw. Capital property is driven by building condition assessments, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and the Ontario Building Code Act. There's numerous water legislative requirements through the Safe Drinking Act, Health Protection and Promotion Act, design guidelines for drinking water systems, and the Brant County Development and Engineering Standards. Wastewater as well has the Sanitary and Sewer Bylaw, Ontario Water Resource Act, Environment Compliance Approvals, Environment Protection Act, Paris Master Servicing Plan, and the St. George Water and Wastewater Servicing EA. Economic Development has the Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan, the Heritage Master Plan, and the Downtown Master Plan. And Communications and Marketing also have a strategic plan. Community and Protective Services has the Fire Master Plan, Community Safety and Wellbeing Strategy, Brant Safe Streets Strategy, the Ambulance Service Review and Action Plan, the Ambulance Act, and the Fire Protection and Prevention Act. Recreation and Community Development, they have the Future Indoor Recreation Facilities Business Plan, the Recreation Master Plan, Transit Feasibility Study, Brantford Brant Drug Strategy, Corporate Accessibility Plan. And Corporate Services, we have the Long-Term Financial Plan, the Development Charges Background Study, the Long-Range Financial Plan for Water and Wastewater and Rate, the Information Technology Strategic Plan, and of course, Public Sector Accounting Standards, PSAB. So there's a lot of documents that drive what we do, is the key message there. So for 2020, there's a number of strategic initiatives that will be coming forward. Those include the Communications and Marketing Strategic Plan, the Community and Safety Wellbeing Strategy, a new official plan, Growth Management Strategy, the Employment Land Needs Study, the Brantford Safe Street Strategy Implementation, the Community Health Hub, and to complete the OPP station and the fire halls in Onondaga, Scotland, and Cairnsville. There's a lot going on. Is there any questions?
At this point, are there any questions for Robin? Councillor House?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Robin. I agree completely that I believe our residents have a capacity to support an increased level of service that we're planning. But I'm going back to the point that Councillor Pierce brought up, and I don't want to beat this to death, and I can only speak to the Paris dwelling side of things, but we have between 5,000 and 6,000 dwellings in Paris, and less than 100 of them would be valued at $350,000. And I'm not sure that it would be different in St. George. I don't know about more the rural areas, but certainly farms are worth more. So I think we may need a little help in defending that $350,000, only because we use this $58.20 bump per year as a key communication element of that. Like, we take everything that's in this binder and we tell the average person, this is only $60 a year to you, when that's not actually the case.
It's not, I mean, it's very dependent on your assessment.
It's very dependent on their assessment, and most of the assessments, I believe, are higher than that. So, and don't get me wrong, I think if it turns out if the average person's tax bill is going up $10 a month, I think nobody's going to complain, but I think we have to be a little careful in how we communicate it. If we're telling them it's only going to go up $4 a month.
There is a difference, too, between assessed value and the actual value that you could sell your house for. The assessed value, they do it every 4 years, and then they incrementally increase it somewhat each year, but is generally speaking lower than what you would sell your house for.
Okay, so if somebody did say to us, hey, you know, we don't understand the disjoint, we could say, if you look at your tax bill,
Correct.
your assessment isn't the $600,000 you just paid for your house.
That's correct, and they're paying their taxes on the assessed value,
Okay.
not what they could sell it for.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bell first.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, just following on what Councillor Howe said, I think the important number is the 2% relative to general inflation. I think that's a really powerful statement at the beginning. You know, if people are living in houses that are $1 million or $2 million or $500,000, they can do their own calculation. And the 2% is a really a good number to start from.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Robin. The revenues, you show the grants from the federal and provincial grants going up by 4%. How much of that is attributed to the gas tax money going into transit?
I will have to have one of the Heathers speak to the details of that,
Okay.
because I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Well, we can pull that out later. What I want to get at is there's lots, I don't know if it's fear mongering or what, but about all the provincial cuts and so forth. And I'm not sure if we've seen the full impact yet, and is that something that, because they don't usually come out till March with their numbers, and I'm just wondering, is there potential to see, things change significantly?
We don't really know at this point. And when you do see the long-term financial plan, we underestimate the grants to reduce our vulnerability. So we assume that we're not going to receive what we have been receiving.
I would say that's a safe assumption, based on what I've seen, so, okay. I guess we'll see what time brings, thanks.
Thanks, Robin. Are there any other questions for Robin? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay.
Back to Michael.
Thank you, Your Worship. And maybe just a quick note that as questions come up, some of them we'll be able to answer, some of them will need more research. So if we don't have an immediate answer, then the staff at the back will be taking notes. And then what we'll do is we'll provide an answer package prior to the beginning of the next meeting. So there's some good questions already. So with that, Your Worship, I would propose that we move into departmental presentations. And I think the initial presentation is, Robin, you're doing an overview, the departmental overview?
That's just what I did, was the overview. So
Okay,
now we're
so
going
we've
into
gone-
mayor and
yeah,
council.
So we'll move directly to the mayor and council, which apparently I'm doing, so. Well, good morning, Your Worship and members of council. So I'm going to do a very quick run-through of a few budgets. I'm going to go do the mayor and council budget and the CAO's area, and I'm happy to take any questions as I go through. I'm just, bear with me, I'm going to. Robin's, I think, touched on the overview, so he was, the mayor and council, maybe for context, the mayor and council has its own budget line, because this is all publicly reported, in terms of both the mayor and councilor's compensation as well as expense lines. For each department, we list some accomplishments, and I think council's had a very busy and productive year, completing a very significant orientation and review of the procedural bylaw and an update of the code of conduct and renewing the contract for the integrity commissioner. Priorities for 2020, certainly for the mayor and council and the staff that are attached to this group as a business unit of the organization, would be to update our meeting management system so our public has easier and more fluid access to the large number of documents that we're releasing publicly, as well as our electronic document management system supporting that. And we've added a cell phone budget as a driver. I think there has been some requests. That's something that council can consider. Heather, I believe that's in the base budget. So, but the council can consider that. So, drivers for the mayor and council's budget, the largest change would be the full freight of the compensation adjustment that was approved back in 2018 and then is fully annualizing this year. As well, we made some small adjustments to some of the technology that's available, and then there is, as I mentioned, we've added cell and data for each councillor for their technology packages. So. Sorry.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, if I could. And sorry, I know it was kind of touched on, but if I could just, because I made a note on this in the overview, under the development services, when it talks it's on page 1-4 is where I'm looking. Development services, you've got planning, the percentage change is 137%, and building and min is 114%. I just want to confirm that that is in fact the new positions that were put into those partway through last year, and now, as Robin said, it's the full year, so that is definitely what those two lines are for?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, because everything else is good, but when you see it and it's like 137%, it just raises a flag. Thank you.
Any other questions for Michael? Councillor
when we initially set out, through you, Mr. Mayor, last year, I believe the question was asked what kind of technology the councillors wanted. And there was some councillors that wanted cell phones. There was some that didn't. And I'm not sure how many council members here want a cell phone, county-issued cell phone, but I don't, because it doesn't work at my house. Residents can only reach me on my landline, which costs me $80 a month. So a cell phone is a waste of money, and I don't want it charged to my expenses. That's just my comment about a county-issued cell phone. I don't know how the rest of council feels about having that added to your budget, your expenses, but I don't, for myself, I don't think it's necessary.
Any other comments? Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to follow on from Councillor Gatwood, my cell phone plan covers everything in Canada, and whether I ring for a week to the council or not on council duty doesn't cost anything else, so I wouldn't agree with it.
Any other questions to Michael regarding the budget piece to the mayor and councillors? Seeing none, thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Here's my next presentation.
Yep, carry on.
Carry on, my wayward son.
Through your worship, next group I'm going to go through is the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer. That includes my office, which also includes the Executive Assistant that the Mayor and I share, as well as Legal and Enforcement Services and the Office of the County Solicitor and Council Services, which is Ms. Boyd's group. I haven't put any accomplishments here. That's maybe I should have put something. But I've assumed that most of the accomplishments that the organization has achieved has been through the department, so they'll talk at length about them later. So,
This guy.
so I think the big budget driver for the office of the CEO, this is mostly a salaries line for my salary as well as our administrative assistants, our executive assistant salary, and the increase there is mostly driven by annualization of that new position that was approved last year for the mayor and I. I carry a small amount of $10,000 a year for contracted services just to acquire the odd support for various things that pop up now and then. Jody, do you want to walk through the legal enforcement services, or are you happy for me to do that? She doesn't seem real eager to get up here, so I'll...
She was up enough last night, wasn't she?
Yeah, she did have a pretty long night last night, so I'll quickly run through this, and then Jody can certainly answer any questions. But it's worth noting that the Legal Enforcement Services Group evolved this year out of the former legal group and then the new Office of the County Solicitor that was created back last year. And I think that's been a very productive and good move for us. And having this group reporting through a solicitor has been a positive experience, I believe. A number of good enforcement, or a number of good accomplishments over the last year. They've implemented a new parking enforcement software. Obviously, and last night was no exception, a number of litigation matters that are now being handled in-house as opposed to handling externally, which has resulted in a very substantive savings that really isn't captured in this budget. A lot of those costs would just fall to the bottom line. So, but I think that this has been a positive financial experience for the county. A number of projects moving along through our communications group around enforcement. We're trying to, I think, do a better job of communicating with the public on how we go about bylaw enforcement services. Priorities over 2020, obviously bylaw enforcement group, which reports into this group, are a very busy group of folks and becoming more busy. So I think we're going to continue to try to maintain service levels and analyze additional resources as we need to. A lot of unknown factors around that, especially we're starting to see some provincial downloading in this area. Animal cruelty was one of the items that seems to have popped up and that has been basically the province has walked away from, and municipalities will continue to pick up slack in areas like that. The Ontario Smoke-Free Act and things like that. And then we'll continue to provide support for other departments, especially around the area of development, which is an area of litigation. And the big budget driver, as Robin already talked about, is the increased insurance premium. I think she told that story quite well. So, and we've got a legal assistant that was added last year, which is annualizing. So, the legal enforcement services budget, as you can see, there is a significant increase. But some of that is driven by just moving people around through the reorganization that was taken last year. And I won't spend too much time on that, but we can answer any questions. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Pierce does have a question first.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. If we can go to page 3.3, for revenues, it's other revenues of 47,000. What is that?
Sure. Revenues that flow into the CAO's office are basically, we charge other departments that have revenue streams, such as the building department, the planning department. We bill the ambulance services group, which then has some third-party funding. So I think the assumption is that my time as CAO is divided amongst the entire organization, and some of my time can be recovered from third parties. So that's where those revenues come from.
Okay, so it's third party, it's not internal.
So some of it is internal. For instance, I would charge, the treasurer may have to help me out with this, but I would charge we would charge the building department, which has building fees flowing into it. We can make a credible argument that we're allowed to do that, so that some of the building fees that would come in can be offset salaries such as mine, the general managers, for example. Likewise, the ambulance service, which is 50% funded by the province and 30-some% funded by the city of Brantford. Some of my time goes towards that, so we can bill those agencies. So that's where those revenues come from.
Okay, and if we went to 3.5 or 3-5, whatever. So in the revenues portion, you've got contributions from reserve and reserve funds, and then down in the expenditures, you've got transfer to reserve. So are we, is that just kind of? I got to be honest. That's the first
I can
thing
say
thought.
it's definitely
Wait a
not
minute.
money laundering.
No, I'm just trying to understand if we're taking from the reserves and then putting into the reserves. I'm trying to understand that.
The treasurer has risen to her feet and now is walking to the front of the room. So I'm going to back away from the microphone and let her take that question.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It is a bit of an odd situation this year in particular because there is normally a transfer to reserve.
Right.
So we're putting money in the insurance reserve to cover retained claims and the deductibles. So that's part of what's in the reserve. But because we also have that large insurance increase, we wanted to show the money coming out. So it's just for visual, so you can see both pieces of that.
Okay, thank you for that, because that clears that up, because when I saw that, I went, okay. Okay, thank you. Insurance again.
Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Michael. Legal enforcement services includes bylaw, correct?
It does,
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I did not know, I thought it was under a different general manager, so I learned that when I was going through the binder. Bylaw, I think, well, I know as a counselor, it's an important department for me, because I'm constantly referring matters to them. And we're looking at this year, an enhanced OPP contract possibly. And I'm just wondering, this is at a high level, and I don't want an answer today, but I want you to think about it. Is it possible we could take some of the responsibilities that the OPP do and pass it over to bylaw? I think they could do it more efficiently, less costly way than the OPP. And I'm bringing that up because I talked to the inspector, and she was noting that there's certain things that the OPP do in our community that bylaw does in other communities. And I'm wondering if we couldn't maybe somewhere in the next year or so, just maybe look at some of those things. So again, it allows the OPP to do those other things that we always talk about, like the speeding and the traffic management. So like I said, I'm not looking for an answer today, and I did talk to Greg about this, but it's just something that I think bears looking at.
Your worship, through you, I actually can answer that today, I think, and Ms. Zudem, I may have to, like, what? You? But the detachment commander and I had the same conversation, and it was a good conversation, and I think what I don't think any of us are quite clear on what we can and can't enforce with bylaw enforcement officers. She's not, and she referred to a couple of municipalities that have their own legislation. The city of Ottawa and the city of Toronto have their own acts, so I think they might have some broader powers than we do. So what I've proposed, and I haven't chatted with Ms. Zudem about it, we've got another solicitor coming on board. That would be the replacement for Ms. Dale that retired earlier this year. And one of our maybe early tasks for that person would be to do some research and actually figure out what are those things that we can do with bylaw enforcement officers as opposed to doing it with sworn officers. And I think that's a good exercise, as you said. So I'm certainly prepared to initiate that. It might be a complicated, certainly when you get 3 or 4 very knowledgeable people in a room and we're still not sure, then obviously there's a complicated story there, but I'm certainly interested in fleshing that out, and the detachment commander said that she would certainly support that. If the OPP can help us out with that research, there might be a good outcome to that, so.
Okay, leave it with you, and we'll see next year when we look at the budget again. Thanks.
Any other questions for Michael before we move on? Seeing none?
Your worship, the next line is the council services budget. This is the office of the county clerk, and as well some of the support that it has provided to council that falls outside of the council, the mayor and council budget. A pretty productive year for this group. I think they've obviously completed the 2018 municipal election cycle, including the compliance audits and the 5 or 6 months of activities that follow that, and then a couple years of rest. So. We've reviewed and updated the code of conduct, and we've done a fairly fulsome analysis on software needs to provide a better solution for our citizens to access the documents that drive our democracy here. Priorities for 2020 would be a ward boundary review, which is outlined in the strategic plan, a redesign of the meeting management system and the electronic document systems, including acquisition of some software, which is included, I think, in the decision packages that you'll see later. And again, budget drivers is mostly just a replacement of existing software packages. So as you can see, this is a fairly straightforward document. The large variance there would be in contracted services, which I'd assume would be supporting the change over to some meeting and document management systems. So with that, happy to the clerk or I can answer any questions about that line.
Councillor Miller.
Not a budget question, but a question about the ward boundary review. Will you be looking for any input from councillors?
I will turn that over to the clerk to answer. So.
I expect the first step will be I'll devise a process and circulate that through council so that everybody can get a feel as to what we plan to do in terms of public engagement and council engagement. Obviously, there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions and a lot of possible structures that we can look at. Yeah. So that would kind of be where I would start. Would be presenting you guys with a process to follow.
Okay, thank you, Heather.
Okay. What's up next? I don't have my agenda here.
We're at corporate services.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Your Worship. With that, I'll stand down and turn it over to Robin to walk through the corporate services.
Thank you.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, corporate services now incorporates human resources, finance and treasury, and the business and technology solutions group. So corporate services administration, some of our 2019 accomplishments were the revamped We revamped the community grants process and policy, some of which was approved last night at CDC. We've implemented Outlook 365 email upgrade. We've completed the development charges background study, and we are still in the process of doing the market review for the compensation and benefits, and as well, the 10-year financial plan. Our priorities for 2020 will be to review the purchasing policy in conjunction with purchase order software, implement the attendance and HR software, undertake an accommodations review, continue with the asset management. Well, it's a 4-year process to get that implemented, and enhance fiber optics to the airport. So when we look at the corporate services administrative budget, the main drivers are salaries and wages, which we've discussed the reasons behind that. There's a reduction in contracted services of $69,000, and that is because the SWIFT contract has now concluded, so we have made our final contribution, so we have now removed that from the budget. The interfunctional charges are, that's a new thing in our budget, and what that is 15% of the administrative pool that was housed in operations, because now we're sharing some of the duties of the administrative pool. So human resources. 2019 accomplishments were the market review of non-union wages and volunteer fire compensation, completed the job document review, project with PWU, completed the job hazard analysis project, which was a health and safety initiative, completed an ergonomic audit by the Ministry of Labor, and conducted 100+ recruitments. For 2020, we have upcoming contract negotiations with both OPSU and the PWU bargaining units. We are going to undertake an HR policy and procedure review, look at our HRIS software implementation. That's a piece of software we already own. We just need to implement that. Policy management software implementation, and continue with the job hazard analysis project. When we look at, do you have a question?
Excuse me, Councillor Bell.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Robin. Recruiting 100+ people in 2019, I'm a little confused. I thought we only had about 250 people on the books. That sounds like a huge turnover of staff or growth in staff. Am I missing something?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, many of the recruitments have been a challenge. So we've gone through recruitments and had to restart the process because we were unsuccessful in getting a candidate. And then oftentimes, once we did get a candidate, if it was an internal candidate, we then had to fill that candidate. It includes all of the summer students. It includes all of the paramedics, which there's a lot of paramedics that we hire in the summer as well. There's been a number of retirements, and overall, it's added up to over 100 recruitments.
But there's nothing hidden in there about turnover rates that we should be aware of?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no. It's not really due to any turnover rates. We are seeing higher than usual retirements, but that's to be expected with the baby boomer generation. But no, we haven't had a mass exodus or anything like that.
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The contract negotiations, when do those contracts expire?
The OPSU contract, I believe, expires July 31st, and the PWU expires in the spring. I'm not exactly sure of the date. Well, we await to receive notice to bargain from the union.
Michael?
I think they both expire this spring. I think one's in April and one's in May, so.
Are you finished, Councillor Gatward?
Yeah.
Councillor Pierce, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. So I know I touched on this last year and in the previous budgets, and unfortunately, I'm going to touch on them again because there's large increases in the materials and supplies. And it's just, I know we talked about it last year, everything's kind of bunched into one. There's a couple spots in materials and supplies where it's got a one-time thing. I'm curious as to, the one time, for example, in human resources, 9,000 one time. Curious what that's for. And then, again, it's a 15% increase in materials and supplies. And, if you flip it over for finance, for the next one, business technology and solutions, it's a 21%. Same thing on materials and supplies. Are we able to break that down? Like, is that papers and pens? What are we talking here?
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor. In the case of HR, that one-time expense is for an education component that we committed to through a recruitment process. So it's for one person to take a specific course.
Okay. So, and again, as we go through, like I've marked it in a lot of them with materials and supplies. It's, you see the increases. It's not, if you add them all up together, it's, because we talked, I guess it was a couple years ago or so, in regards to buying supplies and getting, buying them for everybody and distributing them rather in each department, and yet there's still large increases in materials and supplies. Are we able to get that broken down?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we can break that down and we'll bring it to you at the next meeting. We can break it down by department with an explanation of what the increases are for business and technology solutions, because that is a large increase. I can tell you that 8,000 of it is for security awareness software. 4,500 is for Veeam licenses. $41,000 of it is for the Office 365 subscription, and $7,000 is for hosting a tertiary DR site, and that comes out to about $60,000.
Okay, if we could kind of get that info, that puts a little bit of context to it, rather than, holy smokes, there's a lot of paper and pens.
Yeah, it's not paper and pens.
Okay, but you know where I'm going, right?
Yes, I
Thank you.
understand.
Any other questions for Rob?
Okay, I could move on to the Business and Technology Solutions Department. So that's the IT department. And some of our 2019 accomplishments were decreased infrastructure recovery time by implementing a fully active and mirrored disaster recovery site. Redesign the network architecture, creating a central hub to create improved route diversity and improved failover using wireless network path. So that means if our network fails, like our wired network fails, we have a failover to use Wi-Fi automatically. Improved level of service and security with the implementation of a client relations supervisor and a security administrator role. We built a fiber optic network to the Scotland Community Centre and the Fire Hall in Scotland, and the migration of email to the hosted Microsoft Exchange 365 server. And so for 2020, the plan is to build a fiber optic network to the airport water tower and the fire station and community centers at the same location. Deploy an asset management software solution in conjunction with several other departments. Undergo a network security assessment and security awareness campaign. And restructure support procedures, optimize and standardize the delivery of support and service, and build a tertiary disaster recovery site. So that's basically like a three-way fail-safe. So for budget drivers for business and technology solutions, I already touched on the big one, which was the materials and supplies, and then insurance, which shows a 100% increase, and that's mainly related to the drone insurance.
Councillor Miller first.
Just a couple of questions, if I could, Mr. Mayor, through you to Robin. That insurance, I don't understand, that seems awfully cheap. That's not for the whole computer system for the county, that's just...
No, that's related to the usage of drones.
Just the drone, okay. Because what I'm getting at, I'm sure Mr. Rickart's aware, but, you read about all these other hacks and whatnot to municipalities. I think the city of Saskatoon paid $1 million to some hacker. Is it none of it, I think, was hit with ransomware and stuff like that. So, I mean, the cost of not doing stuff can get quite expensive, but would insurance cover something like that for us?
Well, we have cybersecurity insurance.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
Would that
we do
cover-
have that, and it does cover some of that. Though I think if you're hit with a ransomware, insurance is not going to pay the ransom for you. So,
Okay. All right.
And I don't know if you know, the city of Woodstock were recently hit. I'm not even sure if their website is back up yet.
See, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was weeks and weeks. I'm not sure if it's back up yet, but.
Like I say, I don't like spending money, but sometimes you gotta spend money to save money, and I think this is a
And we-
good
we-
example of that.
We're planning on having some staff from Business and Technology Solutions come to council to give a high-level overview of what they're doing to protect the county's infrastructure.
Well, that'd be interesting. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pierce first. No, you're okay. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Robin, can you tell us how many staff are in this department?
There's approximately 41.
No.
In which
IT,
department?
business technology. Oh, you're talking overall.
Overall, in my division.
In corporate services.
Yeah, there's approximately 10. I can get you the exact number, but it's around 10.
In IT. And how does that compare to other organizations?
We're low.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Robin? Councillor Bell?
One point on the priorities for 2020, building fibre optics network. Do we always route that work to BME?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, typically, yes. BME is our partner, and so we do work with them to implement that. So I believe Heather Mifflin's going to come up and complete the finance section.
Thank you, Robin.
Okay, so for finance, our accomplishments for 2019, we have, currently, our tax arrears level is down to 3.5, which is the lowest since amalgamation, so we're quite pleased with that. In 2019, we worked with operations to complete the water and wastewater long-range financial plan, worked with all the departments to complete the development charges and background study and update and implement that. And then we also successfully contracted out the printing and mailing of the tax bills, which resulted in efficiencies and some cost savings. So for 2020, we have a decision package in there for purchase order software to kind of improve that process. We're looking at replacement of the tax billing and collection software. We're going to assist operations with the water and wastewater rate study. We intend to do a payroll process review and implement some time off request software internally. And then the final piece back to the next part of the development charges or to do whatever is needed to complete the community benefit charge for implementation for January 1, 2021. So the main budget driver for finance is the reduction in, reduction in fees on the credit cards. So when we accept credit cards, of course, there is a fee. We have put a cap of $5,000, so you can't pay for anything over $5,000 with your credit cards because the fees were just getting quite high for those like development-related kind of payments. Any questions on that piece?
Councillor Pierce first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, if I could. Yes, and I noted that, the reduction in the material, so that's good that we're doing that. Now, another huge reduction here that I'm trying to understand, in the finance part, there's rent and financial expenses, and then if you flip it over, in municipal finance, there's also rent and financial expenses, like they've gone down huge. What's up with that?
Okay, that's my next. So in so under municipal finance, the decrease you're seeing there is the decrease in write-off. So in 2019, we had a large industrial that switched from industrial to commercial class for taxes. So we budgeted for that write-off. That's done, so we don't have to budget for that in 2020. In the municipal finance, we've increased our estimate for supplementaries by 200,000, so it's sitting at $1 million. Our manager of finance still believes that's conservative, so. Our OMPF did decrease in this budget by about 63,000. That's partly related to a reduction for 2019 because we didn't know what we were getting last year at budget time. And then further, it has decreased. Our number of households in that calculation for the OMPF has increased, but our share of farmland has decreased. Of course, in here is the reduction in the boundary compensation for taxes, which is part of the boundary agreement. And Robin mentioned before about the debt charges. That's the other big increase in here. It does look like a larger number as in the expense, but it is offset by the contribution from reserves to that. If it's DC-related debt, then the reserves come in to pay that debt. There is the budget, the surplus, budget for the surplus, it continues at 200,000, and that there is in there community grants an amount of 381,000, which does include 50,000 for crossing all bridges, which is a 3-year commitment the council made last year. In 2019, it also included 100,000 to the hospice and 67,000 to St. Joe's itself.
Councillor Pierce?
Thank you. So, sorry, just to back up, just so I'm clear here. So if we take that page that's up there, under expenditures, rent and financial expense, that drop of 67% is due to zoning change from
Not as-
industrial to commercial?
Not a zoning change, a tax class change.
I see, so it'll be a different, okay, I got it. Thank you.
Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Heather. The tax arrears, they're the lowest since amalgamation. Was 2019 the first full year where we went from a 3-year period to a 2-year period?
I believe so, yes.
Would you attribute that to a
Yes,
big part of that? Okay.
yep, yes.
Thank you.
Capital levy, Robin covered most of it. We inflated the increase, or the last year's amount by 5.2, which is the construction index. We also reallocated from operating to capital for projects that were in there that were of capital type. And this allows the project to continue and not any unspent funds to roll to the surplus. So,
Questions? No? Seeing none? Thank you. This is probably a good time to take a break if anyone needs one, so I think we'll adjourn for, what, 10 minutes? Thank you. E, Pam, and Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to do something a little bit different for development services, and I'm going to try to present planning, development, engineering, and building all together. So those are pages 5-1 to 5-9 collectively. And then Rob and I are here to answer any questions. So as you're probably aware, there have been many changes in the planning, development, engineering, and building divisions. And we're learning to balance this change in 2020. In 2019, the department took in 91 planning applications and 652 building permits. In addition to this, development engineering has worked on or continues to work on over 35 subdivisions, 23 site plan applications, 359 preliminary lot grading reviews, 151 grading reviews, 43 lot grading certificates, and 16 site alteration permits. So we are all very busy. Because of the development boom in the county, Development Services hired an additional senior policy planner, 2 new development engineering reviewers, and 1 new lot grading technician, and a plans examiner in 2019. It should be noted that the reorganization of the plans examiner and the building inspectors has allowed the review of building permit applications to now meet the provincial 10-day time limit. And in most cases, our plans examiners are now completing the review well before that 10-day time period. So this is an example that the changes of the new hires are assisting in streamlining development. However, due to the constraints in servicing, various LPAT hearings, and Council's decision to tap the brakes, various development applications in the County of Brant did not move forward. and therefore development services did not meet the development application demands as projected in the 2019 budget. It is also my assumption that the number of development applications were projected too high for the 2019 year, and therefore revenues are lower than projected. We have taken a more realistic approach in development application projections for the 2020 budget, and therefore this is why Council will see such a variance in the 2019 budget and changes accordingly in the 2020 budget, specifically in planning and building. However, it should be noted that development engineering and building revenues could increase substantially before year end, as LIV is expected to bring in about 50 building permits, and Lausanne continues to work in their Mile Hill Phase 2 subdivision in the south end of Paris. So this will assist the 2019 bottom line revenue stream in development services. In 2019, Development Services also launched the new official plan, which utilizes primarily development charges to pay for the 2.5-year project. As identified in the County of Brant strategic plan, there's also much policy works to accomplish with secondary plans and master plans. So it should be noted that good policy, again, creates good development, and therefore in 2020, Development Services will be putting staff resources to completing outstanding policy initiatives to balance small town charm with the anticipated development. And we will also be putting efforts towards heritage and design works, which Council has previously requested. Furthermore, in 2020, both planning and building will be creating electronic efforts towards upgrading our City View program, which will allow applications to be tracked and workflow to be organized more efficiently. And likewise, development engineering will be focusing on a new electronic program called Bluebeam to better serve our clients with technical review and return efficient comments back to our developers in a continued time fashion. Our technologies are anticipated to assist further in streamlining our development process. So again, Development Services is going through many changes, and these changes are reflected in the proposed 2020 budget. And again, Rob and I are here to answer any questions.
Councillor Pierce has the first question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. So Pam, if we could just go back, you were saying, so with the new hires that we put in, we're now able to get to the applications in the 10 days, which is great. And then you went on, you said, because we tapped the brakes, we weren't able to hit the timelines and that decreased the overall. My understanding on the tap the brakes, that was just anything new coming in. So I'm trying to understand, like I guess the overall dollar thing that we didn't meet was a projected, right?
That is correct. There were definitely in the 2019 proposed targets that were too high. And we also, and Rob can probably speak a little bit more to this, there were a few subdivision applications that we were anticipating would come in 2019 that have not yet, because the developers aren't moving as fast as they anticipated.
Okay, so sorry to go on here. So the only thing that wasn't met, or the only thing that we're not able to meet now is the projected growth that we had prior to tapping the brakes, but on the timeframes of hitting the 10 days and all that kind of stuff, we're good on everything on that side, right?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's correct, John. The building permit, that review comes at the back end of the planning process, right? You've got to plan a subdivision, it goes through that process, ultimately gets registered, and then the building permits start going out. So,
right.
So the 10-day piece that Pam mentioned is actually the building permit review for building permits. So that's kind of separate than the planning piece. The tap the brakes a resolution that council adopted really affected the planning revenue side of things. I mean, that resolution resulted in a drop of about $160,000 of anticipated revenue when you combine an area study with 2 plans of subdivision that were affected by that. So they're kind of separate, but they're related because it's all within our department, right? But the 10-day piece is Andre's group, building permits. The revenue piece was the planning side.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Miller?
Thank you. Have we gone through each of these, or okay? We have. Okay. So I just wonder if you can just reconcile this for me. Development engineering review. Accomplishments for 2019: hired 3 new staff to assist with the increased number of development applications. And then if I go to the next page, 5.7 in our binder. Salaries, wages, and benefits are, you've got them going down 9.6%. I'm just trying to reconcile it. You hired 3 new staff, and we're seeing can you reconcile that for me?
Yes, so Development Engineering did hire 3 new staff, 1 in the lot grading area and 2 technicians. Actually, 2 of them started about the same time that I did here at the County of Brant. So Development Engineering is now fully functioning and staffed up. And again, we're anticipating that that will increase our development streamlining.
Okay, but why would the salaries, wages, and benefits show a 9.6% decrease? I mean, what am I missing here?
Your worship, through you, in the development engineering, or the development applications review that we did a few years ago, we had a director's position that was in the budget that we included last year. We've analyzed that. We don't believe that that's, given what Pam has said about the maybe a little more erratic development coming forward, we're holding on that position now. We've removed it from the budget in the context that we didn't achieve some of our revenue targets. So that's why that number is going down. We've pulled a position out that, first of all, we're not sure we could actually even recruit for. And secondly, we're not necessarily convinced at this point that we need. So we've got a new general manager here. She's going to be doing over the next 6 months a fairly exhaustive review of the department to make sure that we are optimizing our resources. And so we've pulled that position out of the budget, notwithstanding that we couldn't bring it forward at another time. So.
Okay. If I could, one more question then. And I'm looking at, because you give a fulsome explanation about the revenues dropping because there wasn't as much planning fees coming in. And I guess the same goes with building. We see the, we expect the revenues to drop significant, well, 10%, I guess that's a good chunk of change. How, as a general manager, how do you make sure that you align the number of inspectors you have with the amount of inspecting to do? How do you align the number of planners you have with the planning applications coming? And I understand it can't be perfect. I mean, I've seen employers, they manage it perfectly because if there's no work that day, they send a worker home. So, but I know we can't do that with planning and building staff, but how do you manage that?
Through the chair, that is a very good question. I'll speak to the building area as you asked about that first. Currently in our building area, we have 1 building inspector position that is not filled, and we don't have plans to fill that position anytime soon unless we absolutely need to. So that's one way we can balance what's coming in with and the demands that we have in our area. In the planning area, like I said, it's really up to the economy and the market of what applications come in, and it is challenging to figure out how much development staff we're going to need. The good thing about the County of Brant is that we have lots of policy work to keep us busy in the times where development is a little lower. So we think that we can balance that very nicely in-house, especially with some of the design works and heritage works that are anticipated and important to this council.
And I suspect too, all the hearings kind of take up a bit of time as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dan.
Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, on 5.7, just a question with the contracted services, down 75%. Is that in light of the new staff that have been hired, we no longer required to do these contracted services now?
That is correct. Currently, we have Ainley that is doing a lot of our peer review, especially on some of the bigger subdivisions and condominiums, and we anticipate that we won't need that external help as much now that we are fully staffed up in development engineering.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor Gatward?
Would the contracted services in several departments go down because we're using our own legal staff now? Sorry. We're using our own legal staff now rather than hiring out to various firms to defend hearings and so on?
Mrs. Zudema will continue to work with our planners and development staff on hearings now and in the future, but I can't comment to where that bottom line comes out of in the budget.
I can speak to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple things, I can answer that question. The changes to the legal fees were made when, in 2018, when the business plan for this county solicitor was put in place. So you won't see those in this budget. What you also won't see, though, and I mentioned it before, is a lot of the litigation stuff just fell to the bottom line. We didn't budget for litigation most of the time. We just assumed that we can't really predict who's going to sue us or what OMB, what developers are going to try to work with us to come up with a approved plan of subdivision of who's going to go to the OMB. So that used to just fall to the bottom line, and it would erode the surplus every year. So I think the positive is that with Ms. Studema's work and the work of her department, that the money falling to the bottom line isn't going to fall there anymore. So I just wanted to mention something that we had, as we've been looking at development services, which has been a bit of a challenging budget year, because we are in this very big growth mode, that I think there's probably room, and you may see some proposals come forward about setting up some departmental reserves, not unlike the building reserve. So the building department when it generates a surplus, that money flows into a reserve, and it helps us with the ups and downs of the building permit world. But the planning world and the development engineering world has those same ups and downs as the building world. We just don't have reserves to smooth those out. So I think as we see, big years where we see large tranches of approvals come forward and large cash flow attached to those, we should be wise at looking at those, additional revenues and putting them in a reserve to smooth out, maybe down years where, maybe because of the economy or because of a number of OMB or LPAT matters, that we have the ability to smooth those numbers out. So the taxpayer isn't having to pick up the difference in the ups and downs of the planning world. So we're not proposing that now, but I think you'll see something come forward in the future on that. We had a good discussion about that at the staff level. So.
Councillor Miller?
Just, on that point, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Michael, I like that idea because it just seems for the last 8 years, we've always been trying to play catch up with this whole department. And then once you get it fully staffed up, and it's not easy to find some of these positions, you get it staffed up and then you find out it's starting to go the other way, so probably a good idea.
Yeah, and I have a comment too. I think this is a good time with a new general manager, and I think what we were talking about when this council introduced the tap the brakes. But I've met with builders, individual builders. I mean, a man that builds a house a year with his 2 boys, and I hope that we're not painting them with the same sort of situations as we are when we were talking about developers. I met with a builder last week and this week, and they felt that they were being maybe slowed down or something because of this whole process of slowing down things by tapping the brakes. And I hope that, like a grocery store, that there are lines for people that are shopping for families of 12, and I hope there's that little lineup that says if you have 3 items or less, there's somebody else that can get you through at a more convenient and a more adaptable rate. I just felt sorry for these guys because that is how they make their money, and they do build 1 house or 2 houses a year, and it's a family-generated business. So I hope that you being new and your new employees, that you do see the difference between those kinds of builders and the builders that are trying to sneak 64 new houses in on the end of a cul-de-sac. So thank you. Councillor Gatwood.
And tap the brakes didn't include things like infill lots where there was already servicing allocated. So that's the type of lots that attract the type of builder that you just described, where it's a 2 or 3 home-based builder business. And so we didn't exclude those people. And I'm glad about that, because we don't want to put anyone out of business because we've got all these big developers coming to town and causing our, causing issues. I guess I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for your support. Any other questions? Hope you're still feeling welcome here.
Thank you.
It's not too late to run. Oh, yes, it is. There you go.
That's my job.
Strategic incentives. Allison.
Thank you, Your Worship. So strategic initiatives is divided into our administration division, economic development and tourism, which includes filming and special events, and communications and marketing. The administration division primarily focused in a large part on the downtown master plan this year. The St. George and Burford community improvement plans were completed and adopted, and I think we've seen a lot of success coming from those. And the onboarding of the new development liaison position, which was approved last year. For 2020, the priorities are stakeholder engagement and implementation for the downtown master plan, coordination and guidance of all the different initiatives. There's a lot coming forward. There's been quite a bit of evolution in economic development, tourism, and communications and marketing. So they have a lot of new initiatives that are going to be started in 2020. And report and implement recommendations from the findings of the development liaison. I think it's important that we report back to you as a new position and a new initiative on how that's working and what some of the recommendations are coming out of that. The 2020 budget drivers are, as with other departments, full year salary and benefits for that new position. Economic development and tourism. As you know, new positions were approved in the 2019 budget, and that's greatly increased the capacity of that department. They've been able to be much more efficient in how they operate and take on much more of the demand as it relates to arts, culture, heritage, and the significant uptick in filming and special event requests that have come in. So for 2019, the focus was on getting the economic development strategy and action plan adopted and up and running, implementing the wayfinding signage strategy, which was also approved. And there was a lot of work done on filming. We got major filming productions from Walmart, Disney, Netflix, HBO, and HGTV, just to name a few that have come through, and we expect that to be an ongoing pipeline of revenue and work for the department. 2020 priorities are to assist with the downtown master plan again, completion of a filming strategy. We've been doing these applications ad hoc, basically, as they come in. We really don't know how competitive we're being, and we think we're probably quite low on the fees and revenues that are coming from that industry. And because it's seen such an increase, we feel like we need to get some benchmarks and get our processes in line with some industry standards, just to be able to not only streamline the process, but be conscious of how much revenue and potential economic impact could come from that industry on its own. We also plan to complete the Heritage Master Plan, complete and implement the Agri-Sector Enhancement and Development Initiative, which was identified in the Economic Development Strategy. There's been a lot of research going into that so far in 2019. Preparation for the 55+ Ontario Winter Games, which we spoke about last night. And I might add to that the potential of hosting the OSAM conference if the bid is successful as well. Budget drivers are related to a new exclusive visitor guide. There has been a lot of work done on really looking at the assets that are standalone for the county. And as you know, some of you know that we've always done that historically with Six Nations and the City of Brantford. We will continue that partnership, but we did feel it important to have a County of Brant standalone guide there as well, and the full year budget for salaries and benefits for new staff. major driver there. And I would speak to materials and supplies there too. That's primarily related to having new staff, new workspaces over in Wincy Mills, and computer equipment, et cetera. Communications and marketing. This department has probably seen the most increase in demand and evolution of what they take on. So a big focus of this department has been looking at all the new initiatives and making sure that all the materials and collateral that go out from the county are branded as such. So there's some consistency. A lot of the departments were operating sort of in silos. It's nobody's fault. There just wasn't anybody there before to maintain that consistency. Having a graphic designer on board has gone a long way in making sure not only that we have the consistency, but not having to outsource all of that work. So there's been a lot of cost savings in having somebody internally who can keep that consistency. The turnaround time is less and the cost is less for that as well. So for 2019, there was a significant increase in engagement on all the county's communication platforms, including digital, website, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. A significant number of print collateral as well that went out, 250 plus print advertisements and over 100 media releases. There were a number of campaigns that were created and supported through that, and I think that's going to increase moving forward, and how this communications and marketing department supports other departments within the county. So that included the strategic plan, Brant Safe Streets, and Brant E-Ride. They launched the monthly public education campaigns for emergency management, fire and enforcement services, and created videos to enhance communications, including People of Brant video series, to increase positive public engagement. And again, public engagement is something that's going to continue to be an increased focus for them. 2020 priorities include a new communication and marketing strategic plan. We really need to refresh how they're approaching all the work and the resources needed to maintain and increase that service. Create plain language, friendly, and corporately branded communication materials for all departments through a multifaceted approach. So again, that's doing a review of all the collateral and communications that are being distributed from every department and making sure that there's some consistency in the messaging going out. Budget drivers are related to software fees, primarily for the county website and internal communications platform. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Pierce first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, just a comment on the economic development tourism page there. Revenue's up 105%. That's fantastic. That's a great story. For the communications and marketing, can you just, you may have alluded to some of it, Allison, can you just help me understand the contracted services as to why it's up 575%?
Yep. So it is a relatively small amount, but it was related to both software and cost sharing between. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I apologize. I was confusing the two lines. That was for increased media training that was approved for council and staff.
That's the one-time deal?
That's right.
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Could you put your microphone? Thank you.
Thank you, Allison, for your overview. Those sheets that you issue each month that show the activities within the departments, I like to see those, and I think that's a great idea, where you list all the various initiatives and how many tourists and how many this and that. And this has certainly grown in the last 5 years. Excuse me. I guess I'm wondering, there's one mention in here about business and development of that, helping with the development of agribusiness in the county. When we did our strategic session council, one of our top priorities was creating industry and jobs. Is that where that item fits in, the agribusiness? Certainly, all these other industries like the film industry and all the tourist-related type initiatives add to jobs in the county, whether it be in the whatever sector within our county. But I guess I'm thinking of something like, are we going to use, try and develop another phase 2 of Brant 403 Business Park, whether it's across the road or somewhere else?
Through you, Your Worship. So what we've been doing, and I think this may have been missed there, is there is still definitely a focus on the manufacturing sector, as historically there has been, and potentially new phases of business parks. Our hope is that we partner with the private sector a little bit more than we did with the Brant 403 Business Park. We do have interested partners at the table. As it relates to the agri-sector enhancement and diversification, that was speaking to wanting to diversify our economy a little bit more and putting policies and support in place that wasn't there before, for specifically for agriculture and on-farm diversification. We didn't really have any policies or support as related to that sector, at least that was going through economic development at the time. So we felt like that was a bit of a gap that needed to be filled, and we were certainly seeing demand on that side. So it's not that manufacturing is no longer a focus, it's just that it's sort of continuing the support that's always happened historically.
Thank you. And how many people are in your department now, including all of those areas that you covered?
There is approximately 12 now.
12? Thank you.
Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, along the same lines, Alison, because not with the agribusiness, but for the 2020 priorities, I would have had something akin to secure a large developable piece of employment land. I think that's been a focus of ours, and I hope it's one of your priorities as well. So I'll leave it at that. I will say that you have some very bright lights working for you in your department. That development liaison, excellent. And Russell and Donna, they're doing a great job. So we expect big things out of your department.
Councillor Bell?
I like Donna's.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Alison. Really following on from what David said, your accomplishment in 2019 was to produce the development strategy and action plan. I think your 2020 priorities are to actually execute on all, and it goes on beyond that. A comment on communications. There's a lot of focus, I mean, the majority of the focus is on electronic means. Do we have a sense of how many people we actually reach with that, and how many people are underserved because they're not on electronics? Can you consider a survey of people in the county to find out how they get their information from us, and whether we've got gaps that we need to plug?
Through your worship, that is always a continuing challenge, certainly on how people want to digest the information that we want to get out. So we try to offer it in as many avenues as possible. I can definitely get you figures on our digital platform. That's obviously easier to track as far as data goes. We could do a survey. Again, you never know whether you're reaching all the people, but we haven't abandoned print communication, but we have tried to diversify a little bit what's going out.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may. I think later in the budget story, we have a plan to determine where our garbage goes. I don't want to relate garbage and this issue, but that was a survey which will inform how we go forward. And I think we need to be informed better on how to go forward with our communication to help you. Thank you.
Michael?
And thank you, and if I could add to that, in the decision packages, there is a communications and marketing plan that we're recommending, about $50,000. That's in the strategic plan. I think that's where a lot of what you're talking about, you know, how do we, my suspicion is there'll be some level of public outreach through that plan, there usually is, and we'll, you know, maybe glean some information on are there some communication gaps between our organization and the public, given the dramatic change that's going on in that landscape. So I think that plan will address a lot of what you're proposing, so we'll look forward to that at decision package time. So.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for all you do. I think your budget is one of the easiest to justify because I've watched over the last year, you do so much more than you need to do, and you do it so well. You're very clever in your hiring, your staff. You can't pay people to smile that much or to be that kind. I can't. You've changed the whole feel of the county in a year. And it looks like they want to do that, and it looks like they're good at it, and they're looking forward to the next few years. You know, some of the departments are very dry. You know, you pay your money, you buy a dump truck, you buy a load of gravel, and I think you're one of the luckiest people that the county. Well, you know what? It's not so much fun talking. It's not so much fun talking about gravel and dump trucks, but this lady. She pays the money and she crosses her fingers and hopes that she's put the right people in place because you're not guaranteed value for her money. She has to know that she's done all the right things to champion the results of the financial amounts that she's asking for here. So I think you've done an amazing job, and thank you for making us all look so very good. So,
Thank you very much.
any other questions? Allison, thank you. Section 7, Rob Walton. I'm sorry, Councillor Gatward.
In addition, Mr. Mayor, to what you just said, the tourism recently released a booklet, and it has 3 holes punched in it, if that helps you remember better. I believe her name was mentioned by Councillor Miller, but it was Ms. Clements. And when I read that booklet, I was so impressed. I thought, wow, this is so good to have everything put together in one package. And so kudos for that, because it gives the county, it gives the province a better view of what's happening in Brant. And I just thought that was a very good, along with those monthly sheets, very good promotion to put out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gatward. Rob Walton. Come and
With his gravel and dump.
come and talk to us about gravel, dump trucks, and salt.
The ho-hum budget here.
Just don't drive one of those gravel trucks down my street. You can drive it down mine. People think, no, I don't want to see that truck on my street.
Well, unless you start parking on an angle, Mr. Wheat, your street is not nearly sexy enough. Yeah. There you go. Mr. Walton.
Just gotta find my presentation here, whatever it is.
Did you want Allison to
No,
get
wants
that
me to
together
say
for you?
He wants me to sign in here for some reason.
Let me know.
Yeah.
I don't know how you're gonna.
I'm just depressed about
He
these.
set it up himself.
I think you're gonna need to do a little song and dance or something, a soft crew routine, maybe. I don't know.
Your driveway never getting plowed.
I'll never get it.
It's getting plowed in.
Oh, boy.
Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here with the ho-hum budget. And actually, we do have sort of a ho-hum budget this year. There aren't a lot of drivers in this. I think we get to capital, we'll have a lot more things to talk about. But and I'll give you a little bit of premonition of stuff that we've got coming up that, you know, maybe we don't have increases this year, but, you know, we can see things down the road as to where they're coming, So we do operations administration, roads, water, wastewater, solid waste, infrastructure services, and property management. Anybody that thinks these are ho-hum should come and talk on the phone with some of our customers someday about these services. Operations admin, the big thing that's happened in 2019 is we actually made some changes here where we combined the admin for public works and water together. Laura Lynn Rouse, who was the admin coordinator for that, is now the purchasing agent, and we feel sad that we lost her in that, but we were very happy that she mostly works for us anyways and being the purchasing agent, and she really couldn't do both of those jobs. So we've got a new admin coordinator, Katrina Tom, and she's doing a good job in bringing those departments together. So really nothing here but inflational changes.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you just go back to that previous page, Rob, if you could, please? When it talks through, you know, the Operations Administration Department, responsible but not limited to, da-da-da-da-da, and it talks, this includes assisting with water and sanitary building. The most important thing I'm pulling out of here is addressing garbage and recycling concerns. And I've highlighted that, and I know I've had many calls on that, and we get the emails when you know, garbage recycling pickup is delayed because of this, delayed because of that. I'm curious, I'm hoping I'm not the only one that sees the number of times that things have been delayed. I don't know if it's for breakdowns or, you know, we haven't really had the bad weather yet this year. Is that part of addressing the garbage and recycling concerns, or are you talking potential green bins and going in that direction? I'm curious about that statement, because that's huge.
If you recall in the, got to get my ears right here, the December 2017, January 2018, we had our sort of our perfect storm of bad weather, contractor employee availability, truck breakdowns and all that sort of stuff, where we actually solved our problems by getting a week behind. At that time, the contractor actually did do the customer service for Waste Management, and through that episode, we learned that we actually more or less took it over ourselves, because all the calls started coming to us because they were overwhelmed by doing it, and we have done it ever since, and they've done a much better job of it. We're well better set up to do it, and this is the way we need to do it going on in the future.
So, sorry, just to confirm there, this is the way we need to do it, as in we get the calls?
We take the calls directly now for this. It used to be the contractor that took them, and shortly after that incident that happened, we put a report through council and said, we're taking this back, and we're going to do it. And I think you'll notice you probably get less calls yourselves now because of that. We certainly have, there's always issue in waste management. There's always external things that happen. Some people don't get their garbage out on time. Sometimes there is whatever, but the admin group here does an excellent job in dealing with them.
Okay, good. And again, I'm just, like I say, I got my own little file for those emails that we get with delayed and hopefully picked up by the next day. Is that all factored into the contract with these delays, or it's just nature of the beast? Hey, I'm trying to understand, like, if it's truck breakdown or truck breakdown or truck breakdown, is there only so many of those we can have before we say to them, hey, you know, we're paying you for a contract, get a different truck type thing, right?
No, there's performance standards in the contract, and we hold them to those performance standards.
That's all I need to know. Thank you.
So just saying again, this is basically 2.5%, basically just inflation. One other thing I will note is in this operations department admin section, they are starting to, they have for some time performed services for corporate services as well, and that in the next year, the plan is to increase their availability to do other things for corporate services as well. Roads. There's really two things in roads that I'd want to talk about, or two or three things. We talk about salt costs and whatever. The big hit on salt costs was last year. We aren't really budgeting for a big increase in that this year. We spend around $1 million in salt. It all depends on the year and when we actually buy the salt. So right now, what we're doing towards the end of November is we're looking at what the budget is and where we're heading towards being at the top of the budget. And we will fill our salt domes. If we have money there, we will, because we'll have an increase in next year, we'll fill those salt domes at the end of the year as much as we can to shift costs and save costs a little bit too. So insurance costs are a big piece of this, so we have no control over that. The increase of $274,000, $232,000 of that is insurance costs. So, and the one other driver here is we do our GPS for our trucks is the technology for the program we have is not supported anymore. We will have to change that out. $50,000 cost there. Any questions on roads?
Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Just on the changing technology with roads, and is that going to allow us to create an opportunity for people to see where the snowplows are?
So, through the chair to council, possibly. There is technology out there to do that now, and we are investigating that. We don't think we're really at a position with our technology and that to actually do that yet, and it likely won't be possible until we pick the next equipment that we would have.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Rob. And I haven't gone through the whole decision package, and I'm just wondering, is the $1 million for hard surfacing in there?
There's in the capital budget, we'll talk about the hard surfacing in the capital budget. So there's, I believe it's $230,000 for hard surfacing, and then there's two other projects which are mentioned in the capital budget.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Rob. In your 2020 priorities, you say continued support for Brant Safe Streets initiative. I remember last year when we talked about it, we added in $150,000. We bumped it up now. So that 150 is now part of your operations budget for the foreseeable future. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Gatward.
Thank you. It says it underneath roads that this includes fleet. So we charge out our fleet usage so that we can replenish our vehicles. But there was talk at one of our meetings of changing that system. How is that going to shake out in 2020?
Through the chair to council, I hope the Heathers are both listening as we talk about that. That isn't shaking out in this budget, but we do need to look at that as we go forward in the future as to how we manage a corporate fleet. We aren't really managing the fleet in a corporate sense yet. You'll see in different departments the fleet is dealt with in different ways, and I think that we should do that. I had intentions of working harder on that to do it, but it was just too big a task for this year to get it done, and hopefully in 2020, preparing for 2021, we would look at that in the bigger picture.
So we'll be still billing when a truck goes out on a project, the rate for that truck back to
That's
the
right.
books so that we can have replacement costs within our books to replace aging vehicles. Is that correct?
That's right, but the whole way we do this and how we're actually replenishing that, the reserve is something we need to look at in the bigger picture. We did change a little bit about how the transfer to reserve was in there for this year. And the surplus, we've actually put that in there as a transfer this year. There used to be 300,000. We put that in as transfer, directly to reserves, not the surplus to be transferred, but it to be transferred. But there's more work to be done on this. This whole thing of charging equipment out, it all sounds like a great thing, but you're really charging yourself. So it's how you charge the taxpayers is really how it comes down to. How much you're charging the taxpayers to keep that fleet going. And across the corporation, we're doing it in different ways for the different departments, and I think that we have some work to do there, and there's a better model for the sustainability.
And to Councillor Miller's question, I think he was referring to the gravel to hardtop that we had committed to putting in $1 million a year, but last year we took a break to play catch up on the money that hadn't been spent from the previous year. Will that be discussed under capital when, or is that?
So the capital budget does not include the $1 million. It includes the standard 230,000, which is more or less the number that's always been in there for a number of years. And there's 2 other projects which are listed there. So we'll talk about that in our capital, but be clear, the $1 million is not there.
Thank you.
Mike would like to speak.
And I just wanted to touch on that. So that, just as a reminder, that $1 million was debt financed. We made a kind of a 2-year commitment. It was a 2017, 2018, where we raised $1 million in debt each of those 2 years to what I would call get a bit of a kickstart into gravel to hardtop. So we aren't recommending that in this budget. And I think that's a council decision if you want to continue to raise debt to convert roads to, unpaved roads to paved roads. That's of course council's decision, but we are, I think, caught up now. We as it was mentioned, we didn't raise any additional money other than the normal $280,000 last year to allow us to finish off those roads that we started over 2017, 2018. So that is a decision. We haven't presented it as a decision package. It's not in the capital budget, but council could consider that through your deliberations. So.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a question in regards to, if a truck goes out and inter-department charges and all that kind of stuff, that would be brown dollars as opposed to green dollars, would it not? Or like how would?
I'm not sure what brown dollars.
Well, just like it's an intern, it's not actual, it's just internal cash per se. It's not actually, this department is actually paying real dollars. It's just, I'm curious as to, like, is that what we're looking at is potentially, so let's say this department uses your truck, they're actually going to pay an actual fee, or will it just be on the books, so to speak?
So right now, that corporate-wide doesn't happen.
Right.
Parks and Rec, they take care of the cost of their own vehicles. Other departments, we have in Public Works have most of them. We do have an accounting system there that does do charging out and the like for operations. I think the thing that we really need to get into is analyzing for all the vehicles, making sure that there's a sound business case to have all the vehicles that you have.
Makes sense.
And then finance them in an appropriate way, The accounting for this, I hate to say this, but it's a bit of a shell game, right? Like there's different ways you can do the shell game and end up with the same thing. The important thing is to have enough in reserves to make sure you can do the purchases and have enough in the tax line that you can charge enough that you can sponsor the system year after year. Mm-hmm. Other than that, how you do it internally, there's dozens of ways you could do it.
Okay, no, I just, when you talked about potential, and Councilor Gower was talking about potential internal departments charging and stuff like that, it just, you're right, it kind of gets messy, because I don't think it's real dollars per se that it's, so, anyway, okay, good enough. I'll leave it at that.
Any other questions?
The other thing about a corporate fleet is there's good ways to save money by repurposing vehicles. We have vehicles which are high-use vehicles, we have vehicles that are lower-use vehicles, and there's some, partway through their life that can be repurposed to be used as one of the lower-purpose vehicles at a lower cost than getting a new vehicle for that usage. And we've already started getting into that model, and you'll see when we do a proposal for a corporate fleet is to go more in that direction of managing across the corporation.
No other questions? Speaking of Public Works, I meant no disrespect. I sit on Public Works, and the kinds of numbers that you deal with are phenomenal, and how important, obviously, the roads are maintained, and the water quality is everything. It's, I didn't mean to make lightly of it. It's a very big deal. And I think that the year that I've sat on Public Works, we've made some very clever decisions, and there's a lot more discussion than people know that go on at committee meetings at Public Works. So you keep playing with your trucks and your gravel, and I'm sure it'll all work out. But I did mean no disrespect.
No problem. I would like to make one more comment about the gravel to hard surface program. One thing that, for July 1st, 2019, we had to pass the asset management policy, and by July 1st, 2021, which is, we thought in July 1st, 2019 was a good 2 years out. We're only a year and a half from that now. We have to bring in the next piece of the asset management plan for the core services, which include roads, water, wastewater, I think that we have to have a hard look at what we're doing with that program as a part of that, and there are probably some areas where we make gains by investing in that, and there'll probably be some decisions made that there's some roads that there'd never be any gain in making improvements. So I think instead of getting excited about spending debt financing another $1 million on it, I think we should get the next piece of the asset management plan done and then make a business decision on what we're doing.
No other questions? Thank you. Moving on. Oh,
So water,
water.
another year, 100% on the inspections from the MOE. I think that's amazing.
That's something that I highlighted in my thing. That's fantastic, and I want to make sure that the public is aware of that. Is that posted anywhere, like, on our website, front and center? Because that's, people always talk about our water and what we're doing and stuff like that, and you just stated there, Rob, there's another year where we attained 100%. That's a great news story. That's not a good news story, and I think that's important for people to know.
So that is reported when you get your quarterly updates to CDC and then to council from water. When they've had the reports, that's always reported to council there. The only thing I'd say is that if we got 98% on one, don't shoot anyone, please. That's 98 still a good mark too, but we certainly strive for the 100. And if you look across the province, when this program started out, I was sitting on the Drinking Water Advisory Council, and on the council, we were actually nervous about what the reaction of the public to this would be. So there's some very big systems that were getting in the 60s and 70s at the first time they did these inspections. And like DWQMS, it's a continuous improvement sort of thing. So across the province, as people have got used to the system, how to work best within it, all of the marks have trended up, which is a good thing for everybody. It's what we want to see. But on a system, if you don't get 100%, it doesn't necessarily mean you aren't getting good water. It's some paperwork stuff and whatever, but we certainly are striving hard to get that 100%.
Keep going. Oh, Councillor Gatward.
Thank you. And just along that same line, I had the opportunity recently to tour some of the water facilities within the municipality that I'd never seen. And I must say that our director of water is so passionate about water systems that we couldn't ask for better staff to manage our water systems. And we have 5, not 1 or not 2, but 5. So they do a great job, and we appreciate that because ultimately everyone sitting around this table is responsible for the water, and I'm so pleased that we have such great staff, and in our succession planning for the future, I sincerely hope and expect from what the director told me that we'll have very smooth transitions. So, thank you for that, Rob. And they thank us for supporting them, too.
So in the water budget, one thing just to note, so last night, committee looked at the fees and charges bylaw, which is part, so you set the revenues in the fees and charges bylaw, which will go to council on the 26th. You'll note here that the service charges are proposed to increase by 5.6%. Well, you didn't do a 5.6% increase on the rates. Part of that is due to growth projections as well, and the amount of water that's we're anticipating to be used and charged out. It's really not too much in here. It's mostly inflational. Now, the one thing you'll note is we do have a $585,000 increase proposed in expenditures, but $437,000 of that is transfers to reserve. So that's a whole balancing act there as to, you know, how much you put in the bank, how much you're saving for tomorrow. There's lots of expenditures coming up here. We need to save some money for tomorrow, that's for sure. Wastewater, very similar, and wastewater, well, we've got to remember what wastewater is. They're doing a great job too. We don't have the same inspection system there. The MOE does inspect them, but there isn't the report card rating thing. There isn't the mandatory annual inspections and the like, but they're doing a great job. Just to note that we did have the citizen tour down at the plant plus or minus 3 weeks ago, I think. I think it went over fairly well. We've got some proposals coming up there. We do propose to do a receiving station at the Paris, which will help out with some of these odor complaints that we've had. And as we look forward towards the next upgrade at Paris, there are a couple of things that would be key things to look at for some of the odor complaints, and making sure that as expansions are done there, that we deal with them. Just in noting on Paris, so in the next couple of years that EA will start for the next upgrade. We're already working with the ministry to get their approval on a data collection program in the Grand River there, so that we have the data that we need to do this next assimilative capacity. I've worked on several of these projects in the past, and you get partway down the road, and then your consultants in the MOE are fighting over the data they have and the applicability of it and the like. So we've been working ahead there. We've had the meetings. The program, I believe, actually has already started, and I think it's a very positive go forward. So again, this budget pretty much inflational. Is that when the fees and charges gets passed, that's when you really pass that the revenue part of it. Solid waste. There's a great picture of the Paris transfer station. I'll have to admit, I haven't been out to it since it's been paved. I'm going to have to get it. Well, we should have had a before and after picture there, because before it certainly didn't look like it does now, that's for sure. And I'm sure the residents are appreciating that that level of service went up tremendously when that was changed. So we do have a new operations contractor at Paris and at Biggers. We had the truckload sales event for composters and rain barrels and sold 450 of them, so I think that was a successful project for sure. Now, one of the big things in 2020 will be to complete the environmental assessment for Biggers Lane, and that's coming along. And we do propose there is a decision package on doing an audit on the curbside set out. And actually, good news in that we were able to actually reduce that at the last minute there, because we have word of some provincial funding that should be available for us on that.
Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on that, can you speak to that a little bit in terms of what the objective is and what the residents might see as possible changes?
Yeah, so to be quite blunt about, our diversion rate in the low 30% is actually not very good. So we need to determine in the average garbage bag, what's going in there that isn't recycling, isn't doing other things that can be done to make that diversion rate higher. And we do actually have two decision packages about making the diversion rate higher. One is the audit, and the other one is the construction and demolition program to get that out of the landfill.
Councillor Gatwood.
So along that line, I was interested when I read the information about the audit, and you're gonna collect 10 bags from 10 areas 4 times a year, and audit what's in there. How are we going to use that to make diversion higher? Like, I think an education program, I mean, we used to preach reduce, reuse, recycle, the 3 Rs, and people started recycling, but there could be some people that will never recycle because they just can't be bothered. So the audit will show what people are putting in their garbage, but I guess and we want to do a detailed audit. Would that be a contractor that's going to do that? Or do we have to hire someone to do that?
Through the mayor, yeah, no, it'll be a consultant that does the audit for us. Yes. Yeah, it's interesting. We need this data to really do the education. So you're right. The next piece of it is the education, but the next piece of it will be council to make some hard decisions on where you go. Sometimes you have to make people think about what they're putting in the garbage. I used to work in a municipality where we got up near 60%, but it was bag tags that drove that. So that's the reality of the situation. You need to force people to do that somehow. And, you know, you can have all the programs you want, and if the people feel there's nothing in it for them, they won't necessarily follow it. So,
Do municipalities ever go to clear garbage bags so that it's visible what's there?
some do. That has other implications too. I'm not sure it's something we necessarily want to promote, but.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Rob. Rob, you said one of the budget drivers reduction of blue box funding. Is that the federal provincial grant line, 350 to 300,000? Is that where that's reflected?
That's the provincial, the WDO grants that we get. And in the next 3 years, I think, there's a big change coming in this program.
That's
Council
what I
has
was
heard
gonna
about
get
this.
to, yeah.
We will eventually be reporting to council on what we see coming. With our contract, which we just started in 2017, actually the end of our contract and the end of the program the way it is, don't align that they align fairly well for us to make the decisions as to where we'll be going ahead. And that's, again, 2 or 3 years down the road. Now, whether this is all roses for us or not, I think that there's big questions around that because we do co-collection here. So if we actually aren't in the recycling business anymore, do we see increases on our garbage collection costs because we're not co-collecting? There's a lot of moving pieces in this, and we don't have all the details. That's why we haven't come back with a report yet. And again, it's like 3 or 4 years away.
Well, we get 300,000. What does it cost us, do you know, to collect the blue boxes? It's obviously more than 300,000.
Oh, yeah, I don't have that number right in front of me, but,
It's significantly more.
Oh,
Well, yeah, and what I was getting at was, the provincial government, I mean, they've already struck a panel, or whatever you call it, a task force to move blue box collecting to the producers, I guess, and I attended one of their presentations, and they have got so much work ahead of them to do, and how it looks. It'd be interesting to see what they come up with, but I think they're in tough. I wouldn't want that job.
under waste management, our contracted services is 2.834 million, so that's for both garbage and recycling collection and processing. So I did note before that there are changes coming up. Yeah, and the one budget driver here was that $50,000 decrease in our provincial funding, which is about half of what our cost changes are in this program. And the big changes are coming up for the next contract, for sure. Infrastructure services, so infrastructure services is the capital projects. One thing to note, all of council hasn't necessarily seen this unless you look at the Public Works Committee reports, but we did put a report to Public Works Committee this month, which will come to council on the 26th, to talk about how we want to do 3 bridges over the next 2 years. So it's the sort of the preamble for, I think, the future of how we go about bridges. And one thing we'll eventually be bringing back through the asset management plan for 2021 is the idea of stable funding out of taxation for bridges at a level that will promote sustainability there. We're spending in the area of 3.1 million right now. Probably needs to be a couple million higher. You don't necessarily have to make that change overnight. We could make it over a number of years, but start building a reserve there, so we just work out of the reserve on bridges, fund it to that level, and then, you know, maybe index it by inflation every year or something like that. But I think that you'll see that proposal come forward as part of asset management. And this little report you're going to see on the 26th is the prelude to that. And managing these 3 relatively large projects together under one contract over 2 years, give the contractor scheduling flexibility, and hopefully we see some good results out of that. And I think the other driver in infrastructure services coming up is asset management. We have worked with corporate services on that. There's a proposal in the budget for some money to be ready for July 1st, 2021. And we really should all want to work towards that anyways, because managing these assets properly is what's going to give best service to the citizens, for sure.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. On page 7-12 for the 2020 priorities, can you just elaborate a little bit on complete the design of the Market Street reconstruction? What's being reconstructed up there?
So there's a proposal. If you looked in the budget last year, this year, we actually had Market Street reconstruction to be undertaken, like the street to be upgraded, you know, curbs and gutters, drainage. We found some interesting things with the underground infrastructure, primarily the drainage and the sanitary sewer, with the train crossing and the depth of that pipes, which makes that actually a very difficult, complicated project. So we need to hire a consultant to do that project. We were going to do it in-house. We got a little ways down the road and figured out that there's complexity to this that is not everyday engineering.
Right, okay.
And we need to have a serious look at that.
Fun.
Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, speaking of Market Street, did we ever get an update on CN? We had approved part of the budget last year to contribute a small portion of a large amount of money that CN was going to spend to redo the signalized crossing at Market Street. Have we heard any update on that?
No, that email from either you or Mark came to us a week or so ago, a week and a half ago, or the request for more information, and we've inquired, but it's not always easy to get answers out of that corporation.
Understood. Thank you.
Not too much in this budget as far as changes. Contracted services up 50,000. This is the year we need to do the structure inspections, so we've budgeted to do that. We also budgeted, I think, about 25,000 in there to do little one-time things if we need some advice on some specialized work and whatever. We always sort of struggled with that in the past, and we put 25,000 in so we can just get somebody in to help us on something if we need to, especially as we're doing more of our projects in-house, some stormwater management expertise and that sort of stuff. So, property management. Now I know how many employees work in property management. It's 2. Actually, one of them is leaving us on Friday, but anyways, we're going to get a replacement there. I'm not sure how these guys actually do everything that they do, but they're busy and they do a great job. And they do actually work with a greater number, like out in some of the other facilities. They are working with Parks and Rec guys and the like to do some of this stuff. So they work together as a team. And we still have Claire helping us out on OPP and the 3 fire stations too. So that's quite helpful, having all those builds and having him help out as well, so. I think that the small increase to the budget here, I think that the main driver on this was just the Wincy Mills being added into the rental pool of costs.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Rob, on this property management, one of the priorities, well, there's nothing listed for the Bucket Center, and I'm wondering is that on the radar?
I think the CAO should answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Bucket Center has its own committee. It's an advisory committee, and they worked this year. It's something that I'd started working on last year on a business case for redevelopment potential, but there's been some snags along the way. One of them was the sale of Mechanic Street was one of the funding mechanisms in that business case, and there were a couple small things. There's just a lot of fluidity in what I would call, future facility planning for the core of Paris. So there is a business case. It's completed. It's got some strength to it, and I actually had a very, very small but I think good conceptual design done by an architect for a fairly reasonable price to just put some structure around what that might look like. So I need to get that business case in front of council at some time, but it's got some weak points and some unknowns that I think just keep popping up as we talk about, maybe a community hub down here. Then some of the uses we projected for the Bucket Center maybe aren't relevant anymore. So, I still at this point don't know what the future of the Bucket Center is. What I can say is right now, our tenant's still there, still pays rent every month. We've, I think, we've got the building in pretty reasonable condition. We capped off some of the holes and boarded up some of the bad windows, and it's a functioning, safe, building, and it can carry that way for a few more years. So, but I think the future of the Bucket Center at this point is still a little unknown.
Okay, you could have just said no and left it at that. That's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Gatward. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our general manager, I'm pleased to see that they're working on some of our road facilities throughout the county. I noticed they did some work at Mount Vernon, and I think that those facilities, the one in South Dumfries, Mount Vernon, and on Pleasant Ridge in the south, and the Mount Vernon services the Burford area, correct? And we do have sort of a satellite yard down at Onondaga where we keep some trucks. But I think those work yards are so important to get our public works staff out into the community, particularly in the winter when we're plowing snow and it's stormy weather and there's school buses running, and we keep our community moving. And at one time, there was a plan to try and centralize that at Bethel. We're not looking at that, are we?
Through the mayor to council. These investments we've made just recently in these yards are very small investments. At Mount Vernon, we put in a female washroom, stuff like that, which is just trying to come up with the times. I think as we look forward in the next 2 or 3 years and start looking at some things, we have to do some substantial investments. I think that it behooves us to really look at what direction we need to go in. And I don't know what that direction is. I don't think it's one centralized yard, I would doubt. But I think that some consolidation as we do some other improvements is in the works. I do believe that.
I hope there'll be consultation on that, because I believe that our crews are doing a good job in the rural areas. Generally, with our snow plowing, I get very few complaints. and it's because they're out where they need to be, out in the reaches of the county. We're pretty spread out, and so I appreciate the good service that they provide us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gatwood. Councillor Wheat.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our CAO, you mentioned that we're still getting some rent at the Bucket Center, but the rent that we're taking in, is it enough to cover the mortgage payment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, I don't believe, I think the mortgage payment was higher. It was a 5-year mortgage and 5 years of rent. And as I recall, the mortgage was higher than the rents.
Any other questions? That's it, Rob?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Trying to get Cindy's up here, but.
Councillor Gatwood.
might
Sorry,
see it.
I intended to ask this. This is to do with property management. Mr. McAvee, who's the capital property manager, had mentioned at a meeting that they plan to hire a staff person for janitorial duties for the new OPP detachment. And is that within his budget or someone else's budget?
The cost of that will be within the police budget, but I don't think that there's been a decision made as to exactly what we're gonna do there. We have contracted services right now, and there's been no decision made to change that.
I looked in their budget and
Yeah.
didn't see it, but I just wondered, whose budget is. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Community and Protective Service, Cindy Stevenson.
No, I got this figured out.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The Community and Protective Services Department includes oversight of fire services, paramedic services, recreation and community development, cemeteries, and parks and facilities. We provide frontline human services to county and city residents through our paramedic service and continuously strive for a high level of customer service and customer satisfaction. We are in a period of preparing for and responding to the growth and change of our residents' demographics, as well as preparing for changes to our climate and environment. The Community and Protective Services Administration budget, as you can see, we have achieved a number of things over the course of this year. The Future Indoor Recreation Facility Study, which, as I just noted, is to prepare for that growth that we're seeing within the County of Brant from a recreation perspective. Construction underway of the 3 new fire halls, construction of the County of Brant OPP detachment, and soft launch of our new public transportation service. Our priorities for 2020 include the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, which must be completed by January 1st of 2021. A facility needs strategy for paramedic services, the Fire Master Plan, new park design and development. We are planning to have likely 4 new parks within the County of Brant next year. the new indoor turf facilities design, and there are some decision packages around those, and transition of our staff and volunteers to the completed fire halls and OPP detachment. Budget drivers within this budget, I will touch on in a moment. So the administration budget includes some additional revenues, which is attributed to expected increases in advertising of the semi-annual Leisure Guide publication.
Cindy, just before you go any further, could we, John Bell has a,
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt your flow, Cindy, but on the 2020 priorities, just for clarity, it says transition of staff volunteers to the fire halls and OPP detachment. Do I read from that we're responsible for moving things from current fire halls, current OPP quarters to their new accommodation? That's our job, county's job?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct. There is assistance for that through our property management group. Our property management coordinator has been involved with some of the discussions around the move from the current OPP detachment to the new detachment already. The detachment commander is actually responsible overall for the move of their equipment, weapons, any furniture that might go, but that is limited. But we are involved with assisting with that process. As far as expenditures, this includes salaries for the general manager, administrative coordinator, and customer service staffing for the Curtis Ave Community Services Office. Customer service coverage is integral to this office as it has become a satellite office site for social services and the Ontario Disability Support Program, with County of Brant clients visiting 5 days per week. The 2020 budget has incorporated some part-time earnings to ensure we do have that coverage, and also grid step and cost of living adjustments for staff wages. Under fire services, 2019 accomplishments, we have brought on board 16 new firefighters who have undergone a fulsome training program and are nearing completion of that. We finalized an emergency response plan, and a number of staff have gone through training for that program. We have completed standardization of auto extrication equipment and training. Our radio communication system is much more robust and functional as we are leasing some space at towers within Scotland and Six Nations, which was previously approved through Council and Committee. We've finalized the firefighter decontamination and hygiene report, and there is a decision package associated with that, and continued with the fire prevention and public education program. The 2020 priorities includes provision of measures to enhance firefighter health and safety. Unfortunately, we have experienced a number of our firefighters that have undergone health issues and concerns recently, and this has become a big priority for us to address. Completion of the master fire plan. We recently awarded a proposal for emergency management and training to lead us through that, and we expect to start that process within the next month. Implementation of the decontamination program. Extend crisis reporting to the station level. Finalize the 3 fire hall construction projects. Our budget drivers include increased response demand with growth across the municipality, maintenance and standardization of apparatus and equipment, and decontamination hours to improve firefighter health and safety. The proposed 2020 operating budget This includes adjustments to increases in revenues expected from inspections, as well as vehicle sales and equipment. For expenditures, the salaries, wages, and benefits includes administration and volunteer firefighter compensation. The proposed adjustment is largely attributed to an increase in volunteer firefighter remuneration to account for an increase in volunteer hours needed for proper cleaning of gear and equipment. Some minor adjustments have been made to materials and supplies to reflect historical actuals across all 8 stations for items such as office supplies, telephones, utilities, and computer hardware. There is a one-time adjustment for building maintenance related to 3 of the stations, including some carpet replacement, water heater replacement, and garage door painting projects. There have been minor adjustments made to contracted services to reflect increases to bunker gear cleaning and some other services based on historical actuals. The rent and financial expenses includes an $18,000 lease cost to reflect the agreement with Silo Wireless to utilize the Scotland and Six Nations communication towers. Interfunctional charges were removed as this was related to overhead from internal IT support that is no longer required from a dispatching perspective. And external transfers have increased due to an increase in payables expected to the Air Fire Department response under our automatic aid agreement.
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you. The insurance line went down. Do we get a itemized statement from the insurance company per department, or how can some departments go up to 200,000 for their insurance and others go down?
Heather is going to speak to that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we do get an itemized list of what insurance relates to each department, and we do budget it accordingly. There was a kind of a different approach, I think, between BFL and Cowan's, because the ones that went down when we switched to BFL were the ones that came up. So I don't know, it might be just some of their philosophies in the background.
I guess I'm wondering, because we have 3 new fire halls coming online in 2020, and you would think that might make the insurance go up. But do they know that?
Possibly.
The insurance company?
I don't know that.
Pardon?
That possibly they don't know that they will be, when they are fully built, then they will be, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, paramedic services. The County of Brant is the delivery agent for paramedic services delivered to the City of Brantford and the County of Brant. This year, the city and the county have been following the new service agreement approved late in 2018, which includes governance oversight by the Paramedic Services Committee. Although the province has not confirmed the 2020 funding model, it is currently assumed that, as in the past, the province will fund approximately 50% of the cost to operate the paramedic service. The balance of costs for the service are apportioned between the city and the county based on the current proportion of population. For 2020, the proportional cost-sharing split is 27.3% for the county and 72.7% for the city. As required in the new service agreement, the Paramedic Services Committee considered the 2020 paramedic service draft budget earlier this year and approved a draft budget at its June 2019 meeting. County of Brant Council then approved the committee's recommendation at the June council meeting. The City Committee of the Whole considered the draft budget earlier this month and will be reviewing that budget at their City Council meeting later this month. The 2020 base budget, as presented, was approved by committee and endorsed by County Council, plus a decision package to add an additional 12-hour ambulance on the road beginning July 1st, 2020, which is to be funded by a one-time reduction in transfers to reserves.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Cindy. Cindy, you know the province is in the process, I guess, of reducing the number of paramedic services to 10 or something like that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that was the message that we had received a number of months ago. Since then, there has been additional messaging from the province that that entire review is on hold at this point. The latest information that I've heard is that they're probably not going to be looking at that for a couple of years.
Okay, so I won't ask you how it might impact next year's budget. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Laferriere.
Just to speak to that briefly, so yesterday I mentioned the Roma piece, how they want to present on some of that, so hopefully one or two of the members of the paramedic services are able to attend. But also that's why we had a big discussion on paramedic services about maintaining our reserves, but keeping an eye on them so they're not too large in case it gets absorbed by the province. We don't want to be giving them municipal money if we don't need to. So we have been aware of that on the paramedic side as a committee, and have been looking at that as one of the things to do to keep as thoughtful an eye on our reserves so they don't get too high in case we are ever absorbed.
I'll just touch on the operating budget to give you some context for some of the changes. The paramedic service is facing a capacity challenge as demands for the service continue to escalate. Staff included adjustments to the 2020 budget to account for continued service growth and inflation. Increases to call volume are a significant driver of the budget. Response to additional calls impact needed supplies, laundering, vehicle maintenance, and increases to meal claims. Inflationary adjustments affect fuel, insurance, property expenses, and economic adjustments to salaries and benefits have been included. And as noted earlier, we will be in collective bargaining with our unionized group next year. The full allocation of a previously approved resource in 2019, including the addition of a supervisor, has been accounted for. And staff have decreased dollars within the base budget allocated to training advanced care paramedics. There was funding approved in 2019 for 4 new advanced care paramedics, and we have reduced that to train 2 new advanced care paramedics in 2020.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Cindy. Can you just elaborate a little on the 308% increase in contracted services? For the benefit of all?
I'm thinking, and I can't recall. You know what that is? I know what that is. That is, sorry, to account for the offload nurse at the Brantford General Hospital. I actually asked Treasury this question a couple days ago. This has not shown up in the budget in the past as it is grant funded. But I do believe that although it's showing here as an expenditure, it's offset by the revenues. And Heather's nodding. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Under Recreation and Community Development, this division includes recreation services, accessibility, the new public transportation program, community development, recreation system administration, and aquatics. Our major 2019 accomplishment is the soft launch of the new public transportation system, Brant E-Ride. We've completed the future indoor recreational facilities business plan, launched the Fair Brant program, implemented a corporate sharps handling policy, and we're part of the Pride event flag raising. In 2020, we will fully implement the public transportation system. It does note a business plan for Silaps Community Center, noting that that project is currently on hold given the decision regarding the library hub project. Splash pad retrofit, community consultation, and overall creation of the community safety and well-being plan, and develop the community engagement program. 2020 budget drivers. The major driver here is the new Brant E-Ride program. We did have some reduction in provincial funding for our Swim to Survive, Learn to Swim program. Continue the Brant Ventures and Natures program events, and some addition of events supported by council such as Pride. So under the operating budget, the revenues under fees and service charges have been significantly adjusted in 2020 due to increases expected in camp programming. We are seeing a lot of demand for camps, and with continued growth in population, we expect that to continue to escalate. Revenues are also including an estimate of expected fares collected under the Brant E-Ride program. The contribution from reserve and reserve funds have increased significantly to attribute for provincial gas tax allocation to offset the public transportation program. Salaries, wages, and benefits include the annualization of new positions approved in 2019, including the facility operator in Scotland and the community development coordinator. Under materials and supplies, adjustments have been made to include additional tree planting for the 2020 Earth Week celebrations, as well as one-time costs to purchase security cameras for the Scotland Community Center and the Paris Community Pool. Other smaller adjustments include minor upgrades and maintenance for the pool facility, including signage, painting, and storage. The major budget driver for this division is expenditures for the municipal public transportation program. Ridership estimates for the first full year of operation were provided during the approval of the program and were based on analysis of data collected by the county's transportation consultants, including survey data of county residents and past utilization of the subsidized transportation program, as well as experience of ridership patterns in other jurisdictions.
Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if in future, because it is such a big ticket item, at least on paper, I'm wondering if in the future of budgeting, we might have some separation of the E-Ride gas tax funding, if that might make sense, because I feel like it looks worse than it is because there's a lag in terms of when we will get our funding. It sounds like, if I heard you correctly, we're going to take some out of reserve. It will come back to us, but it doesn't appear on the balance sheet as though that's coming in when you read it in a simple read. So I'm wondering if that might be helpful for members of the public to see that money that's incoming that wouldn't be incoming if we didn't have a public transportation system.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Staff do plan on providing council an update on the public transportation program. What we've been seeing over the course of the last 6-8 weeks at the December Corporate Development Committee meeting. So as part of that report, we can break down some of those numbers and you know, in future budget years, we could have a separate section on the public transportation. Cemeteries. So this division is responsible for the operation and maintenance of 37 cemeteries within the County of Brant. Our 2019 accomplishments included improvements to the Scotland Cemetery, fencing maintenance and replacement at various cemeteries, the Stone Orchard Cemetery software update, active cemetery signs updated, and a review of the cemetery bylaw. Our 2020 priorities include the Oakland and Paris Cemetery surveying for expansion and opening of new sections, paving roads at the Harley and Paris cemeteries, installation of new active cemetery signs, and some equipment replacement. The 2020 budget drivers, there is a service trend from full burials to cremations, and we did make some adjustments within our revenues to account for that. The frequency of burials in the summer months and customer service standards.
Councillor Miller.
Can you, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, can you explain that second last one? Because I read that and I don't understand why the summer months impact the budget. You have to explain that to me.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe this is noting that we've seen an increase in burials happening within those months over, you know, patterns seen over previous years.
And I'm still not clear. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it depends how you look at it. It would affect the revenues, which when we look at fees that we're charging for burials, overall, we'd be making adjustments for, I guess, over the course of the year, how many burials. But this is just noting that we've seen an increase during the summer months.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So within the operating budget for 2020, the salaries have been adjusted for cost of living increases, and there's a budget for one-time items, including a new pump for watering flowers at the Paris Cemetery and some gate posts at one of our inactive cemeteries. Contracted services have increased, directly related to increasing costs of the county's grass cutting contract, which was tendered earlier this year. Noting that the new contract has resulted in a significantly better level of service than what we've seen in the past.
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The one priority for Oakland, can you tell me, they've done the surveying and they have the plan already so that they're ready to move ground out there and start the actual expansion? And if so, have they spoken to the land leaser who sold us the land initially to let him know that he can't grow crops there this year?
Our Director of Parks and Facilities is here, so she's going to answer this question.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We did notify the landowners about a year ago that this would be their last year that they could grow crops. We do intend to do the surveying this year. The construction wouldn't start until 2021.
Okay, thank you.
We're a very casual council.
Parks and facilities. The Parks and Facilities Division is responsible for operation and maintenance of the county's community centers, parks, and trails, and also booking of our rental facilities across the county. Our 2019 accomplishments include the Canesville Community Center Plan, Indoor Facilities Plan, the feasibility study for the Paris Lawn Bowling Club, Green Lane Sports Field lighting installation, new park plans for the Pinehurst subdivision, and the Poplar Hills playground renovation. 2020 priorities includes planning of new parks, trails, and facilities, construction and project management for the new Canesville Community Center, the Paris Lawn Bowling Club build, which there is a decision package in the budget materials on, Barker's Bush Master Plan, and cycling route implementation. Our drivers for the 2020 budget include new park construction and maintenance, increased facility and park usage, and just maintaining our customer service standards. So as the county continues to grow in population and attract more tourists to our communities, parks and facilities are experiencing increasing usage year over year, which also includes our trail system. The 2020 budget includes adjustments to maintain the current level of service and prepare for continued growth in users. Under revenues, increases to ice, arena facilities, and turf rentals is expected to increase in 2020. There are some revenues collected from the City of Brantford under a municipal service agreement for our staff to maintain the Brantford-Oakland Onondaga Park following the boundary agreement. Salaries have been adjusted to account for the annualization of the new Parks Lead Hand position, which was approved in 2019. There are one-time items included to update some garbage cans in parks and facilities, signage for parks and trails, some paint sprayers for St. George and Green Lane Sports Complex to line the playing fields, and a number of other supplies. The major budget driver under contracted services, again, is the new grass cutting contract and the increase to insurance premiums overall.
Any questions? Councilor Gatward.
Just one related to the lawn bowling club. I think I read recently that they're up to 75 members, which is fabulous because I recall discussion a while back that they were down to 8 members, and we were considering whether that facility was feasible to keep or not and spend a lot of money repairing. So we must have done, or the club must have done a great job recruiting to get 75 members. Do we have a history of the membership for the last 5 years? I'm just curious about that, that's all.
Through you, Mr. Chair, through the recent feasibility study that went through Community Services earlier this month, there were some numbers on members over the last 3 years, I believe. And I don't know them off the top of my head, but I do know it has been increasing steadily over the last 3 years.
Okay.
We can provide that information.
Thank you, and maybe it's our aging population, they're deciding they like this game. Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns? Councilor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. You haven't gone to it yet, but on your next slide there on 8-14, I'm curious here because the majority of those are marked as reductions when they're actually increases. Are the brackets, like the percentage of change, it's actually going up 24%, not down 24%?
Through Mr. Chair, I noticed the same thing going through this, and you're correct, that there's an error in showing the expenditures throughout that document.
I was gonna say, that's a shell game there if we can. Okay.
The bottom line is correct.
Oh, are you finished?
Yep, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Cindy. This last page, is that a subset of the page before? So it's just picking out the bigger facilities? Is that how I understand it?
Through Mr. Chair, this is picking out our community centers, lawn bowling facilities, and the admin group. It does not include the parks and trails.
So I don't need to add it to the net levy of the previous page?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Just on this page, I wanted to touch on the recreational facilities admin, which is broken out here, just to explain what that is. It includes the salaries for the Director of Parks and Facilities, the Park Planner position, and the facility booking staff. And the 2020 increase is attributed to the annualization of the Park Planner position, which was a new position approved in 2019, as well as some increase in facility booking staffing hours to keep pace with the demand for facility and program booking and customer service provided at the Brant Sports Complex. That's all I have.
Are you finished with your slide?
Yes.
Are there any other questions to the final slide? Councillor Gatward.
Cindy, you just said that this sheet doesn't include parks and trails. Where would we find that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the previous operating budget, 813, includes all of the community centers with the exception of Scotland, which is under our Recreation Services Group. But this includes the full operating budget for the Parks and Facilities Division. So parks, trails, our community centers, the Lawn Bowling Club operating budgets, facility bookings are all included in that slide.
Thank you.
Councillor Miller?
Okay, I apologize for asking this, but when I'm looking at the very last one, the Burford Say recreational facilities, that's just the arena/community center, or does that include the soccer fields there and the ball diamonds?
Through you, Mr. Chair. It includes the community center and the splash pad operation actually is in that as well. Or park operations is in a different section of the budget.
Okay, but does that include the soccer fields?
No, it does not.
But just, okay, so the arena and the splash pad? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Were there any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Pierce.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I could, just a statement here. I found in the community service, just for Councillor Gatward there, the registration has grown to 75 members in 2000, this is for the lawn bowling, to 75 in 2019, up from 52 in 2018, and up from 35 the year before. So that's from the report.
I think this is a good opportunity for us to break. We're going to reconvene. Lunch is here. So we're going to come back at 1 o'clock. So we stand adjourned. Not just the library board, the Paris branch of the library system.
Me neither. Not even close. Jesus.
Tried. Good try. I tried.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you to council. It's my pleasure to help present this proposed 2020 budget to council. Your County of Brant Public Library Board passed this proposed budget at our October 2019 meeting, and I bring it forward for your consideration. Being that it's an operating budget, I'm going to let Kelly, our CEO, answer most of your questions, but I'd just like to speak a bit to the cover page to our presentation today. I'd just like to, again, express the appreciation of the board, all of its members, to the fact that the county is our prime funder, and that never is lost on us at any point in our meetings and deliberations throughout a year. And I'd like to go a little bit beyond that today, just to say, you know, in broad strokes, just what that is accomplished with that money. We are thrilled to be able to provide quality library service across our 5 branches and through our website. And we do that with these resources and the talented staff that we've assembled. Not only are we offering quality library service, but we're able to also adapt and modernize ourselves as we go along. I've come before council a number of times and talked about change. You know, the library's changing, we're responding to change. And that's just the same as any of these departments in the county as well. But with the changes in technology, particularly, changes in the information market and the publishing industry, combine those changes with the changes in our growing community and our demographic, we have been provided with the funds by the county to offer that day-to-day quality service, and we are able to respond to some of these challenges, which keeps us where people are. And when I say where people are, sometimes they're in our branch, but sometimes they're on their handheld device or on their iPad at home, and the library is accessible to them there too. So that's the kind of thing that we're so thrilled to be able to accomplish, that quality service with our high-trained staff, and we're able to respond to some of these changes. Now, on the cover page with our accomplishments, you'll see that we have redesigned our library website, which is critical to our library service. That new website will be live and up for the community to use next month. Next week. Okay, great. So there it is. So this is my opportunity to ring the bell about that. Have a look at that website. I think it's a new standard. It's intuitive. It's easier to navigate. I think you'll like it, and I sure hope you have a look. We continue to expand our services out across the county with our reach to Onondaga and all the opportunities that are afforded to us now with the mobile van unit. We're going to respond to our changing demographics with an emphasis on services for adults and seniors in the year ahead. Now, that's with no diminishment to the already great service that children and youth get at the library, but our fastest growing demographic is the older adults and seniors. A lot of those people live alone, and the library service and the accessibility to a library program is critical for wellness and lack of loneliness and isolation. So that's going to be an emphasis point. So I want to reassure you that we're not totally preoccupied with the exciting opportunities for a main branch administrative center in Paris. We continue to have a global county outlook and the services that go with it. So with that, thank you for your time. For particulars or anything else, I'm going to step out of the way and let Kelly, our CEO, answer any questions.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee, I'd like to highlight some of our 2020 priorities as well as our 2020 budget drivers. Before I do that, I want to mention 2 outstanding items from the 2019 budget to give you an update. As Fred said, you have funded the redevelopment of a new library website. That will launch to the public next Thursday, November 28th. We will do an advertising campaign, and we will send notice to everyone in council and at the county that the site is live. The other item I want to mention is the novel branch, or the book dispenser unit that we've purchased for the Onondaga Fire Hall. It is on order. It's being manufactured as we speak. I've been coordinating with Community Services to ensure that the timing of the delivery of the unit itself coincides nicely with the delivery of the building and the opening of the building. So our 2020 priorities will be to expand programming to meet demand, as Fred said, particularly for adults and seniors. We want to equip staff with the skills and resources to serve a growing and changing community. So changing not only in demographics, but changing in needs. We want our staff to be fully equipped to deal with what comes in the door. We're also looking forward to working with the county to design a new, modern, and forward-thinking library for Paris. So our 2020 budget drivers will include writing of our new strategic plan that will guide the library for the next 4 years. We have to deal with the rising costs of digital and electronic materials. We're doing our best to meet growing demand for programs and services. And we have an increasing complex community that we are trying to serve in different ways. So here's the 2020 proposed operating budget for the library. You'll see that there are very little change to our revenues. We do expect to be able to increase our revenue for adult program income by $1,000. The bulk of our changes are in expenditures, most of which are in the salaries, wages, and benefits line. That includes the annualization of one position that was made full-time in 2019. It also includes COLA increases and step increases for our existing staff. Materials and supplies, we have been able to lower some of our expenditures in that line because we were reimbursing Brant County residents who got Brant Ford library cards. We're reimbursing $25 a card for that. With our reciprocal borrowing agreement launched in June of this year, we no longer have that expense. And that helps to offset a small one-time increase. We're launching a pilot program by purchasing equipment to teach coding to kids and digital literacy skills to all of our youngest users. Our insurance line has gone down very slightly, so thank you to Finance for that. Our contracted services also see a small but significant change. We've had to contract locally for a courier system in addition to our interbranch system to replace the previously provincially subsidized system. So you see that increase, unfortunately. We also have some typical inflationary increases to our contracts for cleaning, maintenance, and that kind of thing. So all told, that accounts for our 2020 budget. So I'm happy to take questions.
Councillor House first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Kelly. I would have added the reciprocal borrowing agreement under the accomplishments category, just as a suggestion. I know that this year there were some unexpected expenses related to that elevator.
Yeah.
And I just wondered how you factor that into the forecast for next year.
Sure. So through you, Mr. Mayor, those expenses were capital expenses. To replace and repair and upgrade the elevator, those expenses will all be completely spent out within the 2019 budget year.
Thanks.
Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you. One comment, one question. The comment is the digital citizenship for youth. So important, so needed. I'm so glad you're on that. A lot of libraries aren't yet, so I'm glad that that's part of the forecast. I just had a technical question, which is on the rising cost of digital and electronic materials. Is that folded into the materials and supplies, or is that folded into contracted services? Because I know a lot of those digital services are could be considered contract, but they provide material. So I just wanted to know for my own edification.
A little bit of both, to be honest. And we've tried to balance it internally as much as possible by rerouting money from print purchases into electronic purchases, for instance. We're doing our best to maintain the status quo in terms of expenses to the county at this point, but that will be an ongoing concern for us.
Thank you.
Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Kelly. How many staff do you have on payroll?
We currently have 33. 26 of those are part-time.
Thank you.
Councillor Coleman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thanks again for getting this reciprocal borrowing thing finally signed. Do we have any idea how many residents of Brant County are using the library system in, say, the city of Brantford now?
I don't have any number more
I didn't know whether there was
recent.
something that would track that.
Yeah, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any numbers more recent than October, where Brantford Library estimated there were approximately 100 new registrations from Brant County residents between June and October. I'll keep in touch with them to get updated numbers as the year finishes.
Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Kelly. We've delivered a full year of service now to the Onondaga community with the new machine down there. And I'm wondering, do you have any numbers available on the usage?
Yes, we do. I'm sorry, forgive me, through you, Mr. Mayor. We do track statistics monthly. It's shown a small but steady increase month over month. We estimate about 80 patrons who are using the service out of that service point, and it's approximately 100 items a month, give or take, depending on demand, that are circulating through there currently. Now, that current service is delivered by staff who visit once a week. So the addition of the book dispensing machine, we're anticipating will help increase circulation significantly, since the machine will be available 24/7 within the fire hall.
Within the fire hall?
The fire hall.
So once it's moved?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions for Kelly? If not, thank you very much for your report. And we'll move on to section 10. Heather?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So external agencies. So first I want to just go back. The cost-sharing formula between the city and the county is now being updated annually. So for 2019, it was 27% county, 73% city. For 2020, it's 27.3 county, 72.7 city. So this impacts the health unit, the John Noble Home, paramedic services, and partially through housing. The other methods that we do cost sharing with the city are through caseloads, spots used for childcare, and number of units in housing. So Kelly just did library. So health unit. My notes for health unit, the board approved a 2% increase over their 2019 budget. They're waiting for details from the ministry. They do expect significant reductions beyond 2020. Once they have more concrete information, the board will be meeting again, and they will communicate any further impact to us at that point. Under social agencies, childcare, you can see has a small decrease, and housing has a slight increase. Social housing or social assistance, is the largest increase. In that, social assistance reinvestment represents a $6,000 increase in there. Social assistance and homelessness is increasing just under $20,000. The balance of the increase there is related to, I think it's 3 unmet needs the city is considering. The overall cost is $544,000, which the county share would be about just under $34,000. So they meet to discuss those tomorrow. So at that point, we can, if they approve them or not, we can see whether we leave them in or remove them. John Noble Home. So they did see, I believe you're aware, a drop in their case mix index in 2019, which is tied to their funding for their nursing and personal care. They do expect a further drop in 2020 and have estimated that that case mix index will be at 1, and therefore will a substantial loss in provincial funding. The Home has projected a 2% provincial funding increase in 2019, and the actual was only 1%. The Home is only projecting a 1% increase in 2020. The Home also lost high wage transitional funding in the amount of $11,000. After factoring in all of those reductions, the decrease to the 2020 budget in provincial funding is $140,000. Still, they are only showing a 1.7% increase, so they did okay. Provincial Offenses Act, we maintain the 2019 number. We have seen decreasing revenues over the last few years. At June, we had 116,000, so I'm comfortable with just leaving that number there. GRCA has, their draft budget has increased has an overall increase of 2.5%. But with the apportionment formula applied to the county share is increasing 4.2. At Long Point, they're still in their draft budget as well, and their board has approved a budget increase of 2% or less. Of course, again, the current value assessment of the county as part of the formula will affect the county share. They do note funding for eligible natural hazard management from the MNR was reduced for them by $33,000 or 48%, and this represents a 0.79% of their budget, or increase on their budget. MPAC, so the amount we paid MPAC to do the assessment, we've just done a straight estimate at this point. We haven't heard from them. Then down into policing. So the police contract itself is increasing 1%. The balance of the increase there is about a $43,000 increase related to the new building and maintenance and janitorial for the new building. The Police Services Board, they have an increasing training, which was reflected in a recent report on policing. And it also will help with training regarding the new Police Act. And then there is a one-time cost for a publication and circulation of a report for the Police Services Board.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Heather, the Brant County Health Unit, it's a bit of a state, well, for everybody actually, there's a bit of a state of flux there. The indications we've had from the ministry is that in April 2020, BCHU may not exist any longer. It may become part of one of 10 regional health units. As of the last meeting that I attended, there's still no clarity on that, so it may go the way that the paramedic issues are going. It just may get pushed off into the future. Whatever, that we can expect that next year, assuming BCHU is still there, that we can expect another significant increase in our share of the contribution. This year, the BCHU have worked very hard to find internal efficiencies to offset the increase in costs that the two municipalities have to take, but they've used that up in this year. They won't have the same next year. It's just really a heads up for that.
Any other comments or questions for Heather? No? Thank you for your report. Any questions in general about the budget so far? Michael?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, before maybe we get to any further questions, I did want to make one point of clarification, which is something I messed up on when I was presenting council's budget, which was $300 per counselor in addition for cellular service. And I want to clarify that that is not for cell phones, that's actually for the data service that's attached to your iPads. And we adjusted those funds to meet the actuals. So I think the data that we'd originally budgeted for back probably 4 or 5 years ago is exceeded quite a bit. So, but I think it's more important that council's using the data and using those iPads obviously very well, which I think is a good thing. So, so that's just a point of clarification. We haven't assumed that you want cell phones. That is something you could debate through this budget if you're interested in, but we have just increased your cellular coverage for your iPads to be consistent with actual costs.
Councillor Miller.
Okay, I appreciate what Councillor Bell has mentioned about the health unit. Because I think next 2020, we're going to see some significant provincial cuts to their budget. And I suspect we'll probably see that to the conservation authorities. Do we know? And I'm not sure what other external agencies we have. Where well, it could be directly to municipalities as well. We could see some cuts as there. Maybe just a caveat, I guess, to we got to watch our spending as well, because I don't want to be caught with a 10% increase because, you know, the provinces come out and nail this. I don't think we will, but it's just something I think we need to be cognizant of.
Any other questions before we move on? Can I get a motion to reconvene as a council, please? Councillor Coleman and Councillor Pierce, all those in favor? We're now sitting as a council. Could I get a motion to go in camera, please? Councillor Howes? Councillor Ferrier, thank you.
5-minute recess.
Yep, we'll have a 5-minute recess for the staff.